All right, what is going on? It's drive time on a Friday. It's about 7 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. You know, it's about 36 degrees, but that shows you how cold it's been because it actually feels kind of warm outside on this Friday afternoon. We've had a 2-week stretch of chilly weather because, it's January and we live in Utah. It's called winter. But hey, how are you? Happy Friday. You made it. Congratulations. Time for the weekend. Shout out to all of you for making it through another week, pulling yourself out of bed when you didn't feel like it. Good work, everybody. It's Friday time. Hopefully you have something fun planned for the weekend. It's a jam-packed sports weekend, both locally and nationally. Get to all the storylines on the program today that 4 hours of sports talk radio allows. Of course, one eye ahead to this NFL Conference Championship Sunday. A lot of people think it's the best weekend. I don't know, man. I hear all these debates every single weekend like this is the best weekend of pro football playoffs. I'm a wild card guy only because there are more games. A lot of people love the divisional round, but we have the NFC and the AFC championship game here on our radio station. Of course, we are your home of the biggest and the best football games, whether it's college or pro. These lines have stayed steady now for about 48 hours. However, a $1.3 million bet was laid yesterday on the Kansas City Chiefs to win and to cover. But the public is backing the Buffalo Bills. We discussed that dynamic on the show yesterday. But the first game will be the Commanders and the Eagles. Jaden Daniels looking to become the first rookie quarterback to lead a team to the Super Bowl. And he has become a massive story in and of himself, juxtaposed to a team in the Washington Commanders that have not been to the conference championship in a number of different years. I think it's been 33 years. It'll be the third time that Philadelphia Eagle defensive coordinator Vic Fangio has seen Jaden Daniels this year. That's got to mean something. Philly's a 6-point favorite. Over-under is 47.5. Jalen Hurts sounds like he is still trying to get healthy. Took 7 sacks, I think, last week and just has not looked right. I think it was 65 net passing yards a week ago, but it's a left knee injury. Apparently he's going to be wearing a brace. And the Commanders' defense, led by former Aggie Bobby Wagner, is going to have their hands full with a really good Eagles rushing attack and a passing attack that just doesn't make sense because of their personnel, but should be a fun early game. And then, obviously, the public is very focused on the 4:30 kick between the Bills and the Chiefs at Arrowhead, where Kansas City continues to be a 2-point favorite. That line opened up 1.5 and went towards Kansas City. But, again, they had a $1.3 million bet laid down on them. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your money, but I think Buffalo's the side. We'll talk about it on the program today. The Utah Hockey Club went to Minnesota yesterday, and they smoked the Wild. It was Nemelka's first shutout of the year, 6th shutout of his career. And Utah Hockey Club jumped all over him early. They now have 13 goals in their last 3 games. They've won all 3 games. So they're on a 3-game winning streak. They're going to visit Winnipeg, the best team in the Central Division. That comes your way coming up tonight, actually. They're in action tonight against Winnipeg. Utah Jazz are off tonight. They're going to take on the Memphis Grizzlies on the road tomorrow, and then they're going to be home for a stretch of 4 games. 4 of their next 5 games are at home. That's how I should say that. So the latest on the NBA trade chatters, trade rumors, latest on Jimmy Butler. Could the Jazz get involved with any of these deals after making a deal last week involving Simply Draft Capital that we've talked about on the program? We'll get into it on the show today. Kind of a light night in pro basketball tonight. Only 3 games: Portland, Charlotte, Cleveland, Philadelphia, New Orleans, and Memphis on this Friday night. So, a lot to do on the program. I think Real Salt Lake is like playing a game right now. I'm not really sure. It's preseason. They sent out like a starting 11. So I figured we're going to do a little RSL because we need to get to know this team. There isn't NIL in MLS. A lot of acronyms to start the show. But this roster changeover for Real Salt Lake is something I'm not sure we've ever seen before. So we will do a little RSL on the program. Utah men's hoops back in action tomorrow, taking on Baylor at the Huntsman Center. That's going to be a 2:30 tip time. And we'll get into that game a little bit today. We'll do some college basketball on the show today. Ken Palm yesterday kind of lit the college hoops fire for me as we are kind of marching towards the spring in March. We'll get there. I know it's still late January, but college basketball top of mind. The Utah women with a rivalry game coming up tomorrow night in Provo at 2:30 as well. So both the men and the women in action at 2:30 tomorrow. You can see the men on ESPN2. You can see the women on ESPNU or ESPN Plus. BYU welcomes in a really good defensive basketball team out of the Big 12, Cincinnati. Cincinnati beat BYU last year in their Big 12 opener, so maybe a little payback on the mind. Pete Carroll is back in pro football. The Vegas Raiders have themselves a head coach. The Dallas Cowboys do not. The Dallas Cowboys do not. We'll talk to Porter about that coming up in just a little bit. Pete Carroll, his fourth NFL head coaching job, and it makes sense. We'll get into the latest on the coaching carousel. In pro football, Cole Bishop is going to get a start. As looks like, Taylor Rapp is injured, so Cole Bishop should start for the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid, so a lot of local players in action in pro football over the weekend. Good guest list on this Friday afternoon. We'll start things off with Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune. We haven't talked to Andy in a while. If you follow his social feed, it's been a little planes, trains, and automobiles for our guy Andy Larson. Those aren't pillows. For those of you of a certain age that have seen that movie. I think he got stuck in New Orleans because of snow and ice. Nothing makes sense these days. Have you noticed that? Got snow and ice in New Orleans. We got fires in Los Angeles. Everything feels like it's burning to the ground. But Andy, I think he's back on the ground. So we'll do some jazz, maybe a little RSL with Andy. Howard Beck, the hippest NBA writer around, stops by to give us the latest on the landscape of pro basketball and whether or not we could potentially see trades coming up as far as the trade deadline goes. Gerald, that's right, our guy, Trey Fitzgerald. Like I said, I saw some social media posts. I'm sorry, soccer fans, right now we're pretty football and basketball centric, so I'm not dialed in on MLS preseason. But I think RSL is kind of playing a preseason game today, and there are a bunch of new players. And the CONCACAF match is weeks away. Opening day in MLS isn't that far away. I believe RSL's opening opponent is San Jose. San Jose now has a striker named Chicho Arango, who used to play for RSL. So Gerald himself, Trey Fitzgerald, the legend from the RSL front office, will stop by for a little Real Salt Lake today on the program. Lindsey Rhodes from Sports Illustrated does a great job covering pro football. Will give us a preview of both these conference championship games. And then, of course, our Friday staple is Christopher Camerani from The Athletic. We'll do mostly college football with CK, maybe get a little kind of back and forth and some rapid-fire stuff on the local sports scene. Andy Larson, Howard Beck, Trey Fitzgerald, Lindsey Rhodes, Chris Camerani, me, Spence Checketts, all of you the great listeners on this Friday afternoon. Happy Friday to you. You made it weekend time, and that guy, Porter Larson, who has yet to interview for the vacant Dallas Cowboys head coaching job. What are they going to do, man? Seriously, how's this going to end?
Schottenheimer, maybe Kellen Moore, probably.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure how it ends. If I knew that, I guess I'd have Jerry Jones' job. But listen, it's the status quo. It's what I've expected from the Cowboys, right? You're watching Pete Carroll, Jim Harbaugh, Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel. You're watching all of these guys get hired, get jobs. There's openings all over the place over the last calendar 2 years, and the Cowboys have made their bed, and I think they're going to be sleeping in it for a while.
So we'll get to the latest on the coaching carousel. Just stunned the Cowboys didn't jump on one of the candidates Porter laid out. Pete Carroll feels like a good hire for the Raiders, but of course we've got games to talk about, which is always my preference on the program. Andy Larson will be our first guest right out of the gates. But before we get to Andy on a Friday, courtesy of our friends at Standard Restaurant Supply, your one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs, whether it's online or at their convenient location here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. On a Friday afternoon, it is time now for your opening tip. All right, Porter, right out of the gates, let's do a little pro football. Let's preview these games. We'll start with the Commanders and the Eagles. I want to get your take on it. I'll give you mine. As I referenced to open the show, this is Vic Fangio's third shot at Jaden Daniels, the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. I believe that has to mean something. Although Jaden Daniels, as a rookie, is really doing something that we haven't seen in a long time and has a chance to do something historic. Mike Sando does a really good job covering pro football, did a piece on rookie quarterbacks in the past who have led their teams to kind of this point a conference championship game. There's not a rookie quarterback who's ever led a team to a Super Bowl. Daniels could do that coming up on Sunday. And, in the past, just examples off the top of your head, it's Ben Roethlisberger, it's Mark Sanchez. And as a Jets fan, I can tell you that Jets team was all defense and special teams. And it was like, all right, Mark, just don't screw it up. Don't butt fumble, which he ended up doing before he ended up getting released. And nobody ever thought that team was winning a Super Bowl. And Ben Roethlisberger, as a rookie, was not the quarterback he ended up being later on in his career when he was a guy that could get you in on his own, more or less. That Steelers team was also built off defense and special teams. The Commanders have a very mediocre defense, and actually the numbers tell you their special teams is lower tier in pro football. This has been about this young quarterback. On the other side of things, I understand the criticism when it comes to the passing attack for the Eagles. I really like Jalen Hurts, and I'm going to stay on that hill. I'm not selling my Jalen Hurts real estate. But last week against the Rams, I think they had 65 net yards passing. It's just not a formula to win Super Bowls. I don't think it is, at least in pro football. And when you look at potentially one of, if not the best offensive lines in all of football, Dallas Goedert is now healthy. He's a top shelf tight end. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, can you name clearly a better 1-2 punch at wide receiver in pro football? Maybe you can, but it's not clear. And, oh, by the way, the best running back, not just this year, but maybe in a generation, Saquon Barkley. So I get the Jalen Hurts criticism, but I just think this team is built to win. I think they're built to win, and maybe they lucked out this year a little bit with a rookie quarterback in the Commanders. I'll tell you what, man, as I'm kind of preparing for shows these days and listening to podcasts or watching shows or just reading pieces, a lot of really, really smart football people believe the Commanders are going to win this game, but I don't. It's not inclement weather, but it is Philly in January. It's going to be about 37, 38 degrees, no precipitation as of now. And I'll be honest, I would love to see Jaden Daniels get this thing done because it would be historic, but I'll take Philly at home. Porter, where are you at right now, a couple days away from Commanders-Eagles?
I'm with you. I think Philly wins the game, but they're going to have to in a certain way. It's not going to be a game where they don't want a shootout here. This is the way that I think Philly looks at the recipe here, is to limit Jaden Daniels' opportunities, limit the times he's able to touch the football, and a heavy dose of Saquon Barkley, a heavy dose of the RPO stuff, and some Jalen Hurts on the ground as well. You mentioned it, to win a Super Bowl, you're not going to want the 60 yards passing as your total, but to beat this Washington team, I think that recipe is something that you absolutely can use. Try to kind of muck the game up, slow it down a little bit, and if Philly can keep the over out of play, which I think is at 48 or so right now, I'm looking at a 28-17. That's their recipe for success. If it turns into a shootout, man, that kid on the other side can do some things that can scare you. And that's, I think, what they want to avoid, and probably the route you see this game going.
Eagles 14-1 since October, 2 straight home postseason victories. I read today they have not lost a football game that Jalen Hurts has started and finished since 2019. They've won 10 straight. Of course, Saquon nearly set the NFL season single-season rushing record, but he decided to sit final week, even though Dickerson needed one less game to do it anyway. They've got the top-rated defense in the NFL. And I love seeing history, but I'm always one when we actually try to predict this stuff, which, as I talk about all the time, is an exercise in futility that leans on the side that has done this before. And the fact of the matter is, Jaden Daniels is a rookie who just hasn't done it before. But if he does it, it would be an awesome story. There's no doubt. All right, let's move over now to the Bills and the Chiefs, the game that I'll just give you my opinion. This feels like I'll just say I'll choose the winner of this game to win the Super Bowl. Okay, I don't think that's a hot take. But Bills Chiefs, it's just a situation, as I've talked about all year, that I feel like it's Josh Allen's time. And Buffalo has changed the way they played a little bit offensively to take some pressure off of Josh, although he continues to be one of the elite quarterbacks, maybe top 2 or 3 in all of pro football. But it's really been their rushing attack that's allowed them to limit some of the turnovers. And this has been Josh Allen's most efficient season. So ultimately, 7-5 Josh is in the postseason. I'm not a wins as quarterback stat guy, as you know. 23 touchdown passes, only 4 picks, 7 TDs rushing in the postseason. That's second in the NFL already all time, and that's 1 behind Steve Young. His 3 losses to Kansas City, of course. Josh has been good. not great, not as good as he's been against other teams. 802 yards, 7 TDs, 81 of 126, of course. And then on the other side is the Kansas City Chiefs, who seem to have figured out a way to age gracefully and win in whatever way they need to win. I mean, back in the day, it was Mahomes to Tyreek Hill. If you had Tyreek Hill in a certain year in fantasy football, you probably won every game when he would burst on the scene, a prime Travis Kelce. And it was one of the most entertaining football offenses I'd ever seen in my life. That's not who they are anymore. And I'm just going to ride with what I've been saying all along. Now, Steve Spagnuolo treats Josh Allen a little bit differently than he does other quarterbacks, and he's one of the elite defensive coordinators in all of pro football. And Andy Reid seems to figure it out every single year. And, I was texting with my brothers about the game, and I said, or about the Super Bowl, who I thought was going to win it. And I said, if I was going to put money on it, I would put money on the Chiefs. But I just feel like this is Josh's year, and I feel like it's Buffalo's year. As I referenced earlier, Taylor Rapp is going to sit, meaning Cole Bishop will get the start, former Utah Ute. Matt Milano, no injury designation after hurting his hamstring last week. The Chiefs do get Jalen Watson back, their cornerback, who last played, he played for the first time last week after breaking his ankle in October against San Francisco. These two teams met for the AFC title back in 2021. It's weird that it was 4 years ago. It feels like they meet for the AFC every single year. The Bills have had plenty of success against the Chiefs in the regular season, but the Chiefs are the Chiefs and the playoffs are the playoffs. Having said that, I am taking the road team, and I very much anticipate sitting on my couch on Sunday afternoon or / evening watching this game and wondering why I decided to bet against 15 in Kansas City. But, Porter, I'll take the Bills on the road. I think it's Josh's time, man. Where are you at as far as the heavyweight matchup on Sunday between Buffalo and Kansas City?
I want to agree with you, and I kind of have that same underlying feeling that Josh Allen has been building to this point for a long time, and we saw him in 2021 nearly get there in what was just a phenomenal football game that ultimately Kansas City won. But, kind of felt that same way when Joe Burrow got there for the second year in a row. We kind of felt that same way when Lamar Jackson got there against Patrick Mahomes a year ago. And, we just keep continuing to have this conversation where we feel like it's this next quarterback's time to overtake Patrick Mahomes. And I don't know if that is a boredom with what Patrick is doing, which is hard. It's not boredom because of how good he is, but maybe settling into it being just something we're comfortable with, we're used to. But I think that when I get to Sunday, Spence, my feeling about Josh Allen taking that next step and overtaking Mahomes is going to be gone. And I think I'm going to be feeling like Kansas City is going to be playing in the Super Bowl a few weeks from right now. And I don't know if that's me falling back into that narrative of Patrick and the Chiefs just being too good year in and year out. But, man, I do think there's also a little bit extra on the Chiefs this year as far as their motivation goes, because that three-peat is, in NFL standards, that's a huge, high watermark that not many organizations get to. And I know that in the Chiefs locker room, that's something that they've been really discussing, really looking at. Not just one Super Bowl, but a three-peat. And, I feel like there is motivation. Obviously, there's motivation to win a Super Bowl, but there's motivation to win that one, to get to number 3, to get to something that you don't see in the NFL. And that's like, what else does Patrick Mahomes have to prove? That's really one of the only things there. And although I keep wanting to pick the Buffalo Bills because I do think Josh Allen's taken a step forward, I think I'm going to veer towards Kansas City, basically. Going with my gut feeling rather than what I kind of want to happen.
I fully anticipate watching that game in the fourth quarter and just saying to myself, you idiot, don't ever pick against 15 in the postseason. Since meeting for that AFC championship crown back in 2021, these two teams have met 7 times. Buffalo has won 4 of the 7. All 4 of those games have been in the regular season. Kansas City has won 3 of the 7. All 3 of those games have been in the playoffs. So something to think about. All right. Time now for your PGA Tour leaderboard from You Into Golf. They're doing a special on Callaway right now, which is the future of performance. They have AI smart face irons. That feels unfair, but whatever. Go buy some Callaways. Over at You Into, the local boys did not, well, have not fared well so far. It's the Farmer Insurance Open. It's round 3. I believe they're at Torrey Pines South today. Andrew Novak just birdied to take the lead. He's at 6 under par. Hayden Springer and Lanto Griffin also at 6 under. I think Lanto's not in the clubhouse yet. This is in progress. Nobody's in the clubhouse yet. Joel Damon of Netflix fame, he's in the top 5 at 500, as is Harris English. You know, ironically enough, most of the big-name guys didn't make the cut, including local boy Tony Finau. Max Homa did not make the cut. Ludwig Aberg, who was off to a great start, is still in the top 10 at 4 under. Jason Day just bogeyed, as I was about to say his name. He's now at 3 under. And we'll scroll down a little bit, some notables. Keegan Bradley and Sahith Theegala are both at 2 under par right now. Zach Johnson's at 1 under par right now. Zach Blair, who had a 66 round 1, followed it up with a 78 round 2. He's even through 13. That's good for 38th. He's at even par, but at least he made the cut, so we'll probably take home some money, which is always good. But, yeah, most of the bigger name players did not make the cut at the Farmers Insurance. Local boy Patrick Fishburne did not make the cut. Shane Lowry did not make the cut. As I referenced, Tony Finau did not make the cut, and neither did Max Homa. So most of the bigger names in this tournament did not make it to play through the weekend. But, of course, we'll keep you up to date, courtesy of our good friends at You Into Golf. We'll catch a quick break. We'll bring in Andy Larson coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. Throwing it back today to the 80s. Yesterday, our bump theme was songs we hate but you might love. Today, Walking the Dog had the old Spotify on shuffle. This song came up. Napoleon Dynamite, Can't Hardly Wait. So the rule, Porter, today is you have to pick a song from a movie that you like. And both Can't Hardly Wait, Napoleon Dynamite quality movies.
I was trying to think of the movie I've heard that song in. I knew there was one there, but I wasn't putting my finger on it.
Our next guest has had a very interesting week, I believe. Andy Larson, Salt Lake Tribune on a Friday. Andy, happy Friday. How are you?
I'm good, man. Happy to be home.
Okay, so you're on the ground and you're safe. Tell us about this adventure. I've just been following it from afar, man. It's been quite a week for you, yes?
Yeah, it's been cool. It's stacked up as like already a really fun Jazz road trip, right? Where the Jazz would play the Pelicans in New Orleans on Friday, and then on Monday, leaving a full weekend for tourist activities in New Orleans of various types, right? Like, and for us in the NBA beat business, like we're typically going to a new city every day, right? Or at least every other day. So for back-to-back means you're crunching in flights at 6 a.m. and it's not always, a lot of fun from a travel point of view. This one was fun. And so obviously New Orleans is a great city. And then it turned out that the snowstorm of literally the century was coming on Tuesday. So the Jazz rushed to get out of there after the game on Monday night. And my flight was canceled on Tuesday, was then canceled again on Wednesday. They had 9 inches of snow. It was crazy. It was honestly a lot of fun to see New Orleans that way. Everything, every restaurant, every bar, every tourist attraction was closed on Tuesday and Wednesday. But it was fun just to like go out and play in the snow and slide down Bourbon Street. And then finally got home. Our flight left around 9 p.m. last night and got in at about midnight. And so, yeah, back here and after a week-long road trip in which I saw 2 Jazz games.
Well, welcome home, my friend. I'm glad you're safe. I don't know. I don't know why the first thought that came to my mind was I wonder if Andy dressed warm enough for New Orleans. Like, were you prepared for that weather in a city that typically is pretty lovely this time of year?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. So I had a couple of sweaters, which I stacked and, obviously wore those over and over and over again. But, what are you going to do?
All right. Well, glad you're home. And since it's been a minute, we have a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. I want to use the bulk of our conversation to talk about the work you've been doing, which has been high quality per usual. But let's start with the trade the Jazz made. And I've covered it top to bottom. We've had a number of guests on to discuss it, so the listenership is well aware of my take. What's the Andy Larson take on the Jazz Suns trade involving only draft capital?
Yeah, look, I think it's a deal that does make sense, at least theoretically, for both teams. And you see why the Suns did it. You see why the Jazz did it. The Jazz are compiling draft capital into one, hopefully better asset. The question, I think, is kind of whether or not that's a good bet. And I think mathematically, like, if you look at kind of the history of the draft, you'd probably rather have 3 shots rather than one better shot. Because as we've seen from the Jazz's draft picks, like, the guy you drafted 29 may be just as good as or better than the guy you drafted number 10, because that's just how players work. And look, the Jazz are tanking to try to get a top 5 pick here, and the 2031, as Justin pointed out, is unprotected, can be the number 1 pick in 2031, but odds are that it won't be, right? And so I think you really have to have a belief that if you look at like kind of the actual draft odds and the value of a draft pick over time, that Suns pick will be in the top 5 or at least the top 10 in order for this to work out. Now, and are the odds that the Suns will be a bottom 10 team in 2031? I think you'd have to say, it looks like a terrible situation right now, but 6 years down the road is long enough that we really just don't have any idea. We know Matt Ishbia is probably going to be willing to spend. It's just kind of whether or not he can put a contender or a good team together in Phoenix with that money without any assets. And maybe you can. Maybe you just get enough free agents to sign up for Phoenix and warm weather and, whatever you can do to put that together to make the Suns a better team in 2031.
So
I guess the only other thing – go ahead.
No. You finish. Go.
The only other thing I'll say is I think often when you trade sooner picks for later picks, you get a better deal than this. And I think this is a pretty fair deal for both teams in terms of like the, again, mathematical draft value of each thing, of each pick. But that the pick is 6 years down the road usually comes with kind of more of a positive EV. You know, like when the Spurs traded a pick to get another pick down the road, that you generally expect that to be a better pick in the future just because of the kind of the time value, if you will. And I don't know that the Jazz got that in this deal.
So to your point, and I've said this to a number of people, because, you know, if you don't cover the league and if you just kind of pay attention casually, you see this trade, you're like, what are we doing? And then, you know, when you really understand what the risk is, I agree with you that I see it from both sides. If I'm Phoenix, I do it. If I'm the Jazz, I probably take the risk. But it is a risk, and we won't know if it paid off until 2031. There's a good chance that Zanuck isn't even running the team anymore. We have no idea what it's going to turn out to be, but it is a bit of a change of their front-facing messaging of as many bites of the apple as possible, right? And so I wonder if there's any other motivation, because I do feel like I agree with you that I'd rather have more picks as opposed to a chance at one really good pick. Now, if this turns out to be a top 5 pick, we're going to sound like idiots, and I admit that. The history of this franchise, John Carl, late, Donovan Mitchell, late lottery, Gobert, late lottery. We could keep going. You know, Hayward was a later lottery pick. Most of the better players we've had here have come with value picks later on. Or in the middle of the first round, later on in the first round, sometimes in the second round, like Paul Millsap. Now, history does tell us that the best chance to get a great player is top 3. And so that's the deal here. That's why you do it. But is there any other reasoning? Like maybe they don't want to add 3 rookies for 3 straight years. Maybe they just don't want to add a grip of young players. Are there any other reasons that maybe we're missing here, Andy?
I mean, I think there's a couple things. One, you're right that like adding 9 rookies in 3 years is a lot. I would be more concerned about that if the last 6 had been all of them were promising, right? Like to me, that there are players that you can de-emphasize out of this top 6 group and kind of be okay with it, given that they haven't popped in their first couple of years, right? I will say that the end of this year's first round has struggled a little bit. And so I think there's kind of an understanding that, look, this number 30 pick you're trading in 2025 is maybe weaker than you may get in a average draft. And that I think also plays into the decision making. But yeah, you know, ultimately I like this deal better than say the one where the Jazz got the 2027 top 4 protected Lakers pick, because I think that top 4 protection is such a big deal. Having this one at least be completely unprotected means that it does have a lot of value, both kind of hopefully in use as a definitely a lottery ticket, and then also kind of a conceptual thing you can sell to other teams if you do end up trading it in the next 6 years.
Let's stay in the space of potential moves. Your buddy Tim McMahon dropped by yesterday. And, you know, sometimes online rumors are really difficult to ascertain as far as whether it's real or whether it's aggregated, whether it's clickbait. So I try to just go to the websites or the social profiles of people I trust. And it does seem like anybody who writes a trade primer talks about the Jazz as a team that could be active with players of their own, veterans like John Collins or Colin Sexton, et cetera, Jordan Clarkson, or a conduit to a bigger deal because they have clean books, and we've seen them do that before with the Derrick Roses and Russell Westbrooks of the world. But what do you anticipate, if anything, the Jazz doing prior to February 6th?
Yeah, I've been intrigued at the amount of reporting and amount of interest there's been in Colin Sexton and Colin Sexton and John Collins. Those two guys, and especially because John Collins is having a terrific shooting year, are shooting well enough and are adding enough statistical value to their teams that I think they may have positive trade value. And I think if they have kind of, frankly, any positive trade value at this year's trade deadline, the Jazz should jump on those deals because it doesn't make sense to continue to sit them out for fake injuries or even just resting them so that they don't play basketball for your team. You know, that's not going to raise their trade value any further. Nor do I think like their expiring contracts next year will make them better trade targets, right? Like I think they make sense as trade deadline acquisitions for a number of teams who feel like they're not good enough right now. So, the Lakers, the Rockets, I mean, you can kind of go down the list of teams that kind of want to add value, the Kings. I think there are a lot of kind of trade partners that make some sense. As always, the problem with those guys is they make roughly just under $20 million and $25 million, respectively, for Colin Sexton and Jordan and John Collins. And teams need to have contracts that kind of add up to those salaries in order for the Jazz to get back, that don't hurt their team more than acquiring Colin Sexton and John Collins helps. So that's going to be the interesting thing to me. But it does seem like there is some value out there for the Jazz to get either kind of a load of second round picks or maybe even a bad first round pick for one or both of those players.
All right, this admittedly is, okay, let's do some sports talk radio black magic to come up with a topic about the Jazz because, it's just a tough scene when they're losing the way they are, although there have been some signs that I think are positive that Jazz fans should focus on. We'll get there in a moment. And I've talked to a bevy of guests on this. Haberstroh actually has some data that he dropped on me when I asked him this question. The fact of the matter is Lauri Markkanen's numbers are down. And the fact of the matter is he's 27 years old, so he's got, maybe 2-3 years left in his prime. And I always wonder what the effect is on a star player when his team asks him to sit incrementally throughout the course of a season, and whether or not it's fair to wonder if you're wasting a player's prime and if this dynamic is having an adverse effect on Markkanen as a player. We saw OKC do it with Shea. It's obviously worked for them. You're around the team. You talked to Lauri about the dynamic of tanking. Do you think this is having is there a danger here to waste a really good player's prime while you're trying to figure out things around him?
I do think the tanking is having an adverse effect on Lauri's current play, and I think it honestly just explains most of it, right? Like he's taking shots that he didn't in the previous two seasons. Teams don't have to defend a wide variety of Jazz players. It is just kind of an unfair situation for him. And frankly, I see it in his motivation, and I see it in the way he talks about the game. Like he is. It's not that he's not trying his best out there, but he is. It's not necessarily the biggest. It's not. He's not playing the way he did over the last couple of years, because he is very smart and aware of what's going on, right? Like there is just definitely an element to that where he can just be more experimental and try new things he hasn't tried before. And because this is a developmental year, the mistakes are fine and even encouraged. I'm not worried about that impacting his future play when the Jazz are trying to be good again. In his career, right? Like I basically think that he is the player that we saw for last season and 2 seasons ago, where he is, where his shooting percentages are up, where he is one of the most efficient scorers in the NBA. I think on a reasonable team that's playing well, that has someone to pass him the ball, frankly, he can be that player again. And I don't see any kind of like real physical or prime kind of worries on that he's taken a step back.
So one of the things that makes you really good at your job, because as I was reading through the piece you did on the tanking thing, you articulated kind of the way I feel about the entire thing pretty well, because, you get a lot of feedback from listeners, and I've got a ton of friends and family members here locally that just love the Jazz. And so I get the question, I'm sure you get it all the time, like, what the hell? What's going on? Right? And I always say to them, they're doing the right thing, but it sucks, right? And so, like, I agree with the approach, and I feel like they should have done it 2-3 years ago, but I'm on record, and it is what it is, so here we are. But I can't say that I love it, and, as you say in your piece, it just feels so wrong. When you get the question, like, what are the Jazz doing? How do you address that? What's your answer?
Man, exactly the same as you. This is the right thing, but it sucks. And heck, I think Larry Markkinen thinks the same thing too, right? Like, I mean, he said it sucks, but this is how you develop rosters in this league, and that's everyone understands what's happening here. I mean, I talked to Patty Mills about this. Patty Mills understands this. I think like John Collins is frustrated by having to sit, but I think he understands it, right? Like everyone understands why the Jazz are doing this. And I do think that that it does make so much sense, and yet it's so backwards where you're sitting just, a 25-year-old Colin Sexton because he's tired, or a 23-year-old Walker Kessler out of rest, like those, or 26 or 27-year-old John Collins with a fake injury. Like, it does just suck, and it is you're kind of wasting the lives of these careers in some sense, at least like wasting the amount of fun that potentially could be being had in the NBA. And so I think it's time for the league to think about and really make some real fixes on how to do this. And I think we've learned that smoothing lottery odds isn't the answer. I think you have to figure out a way to make even the worst teams try to win as much as possible. And I get that it works in the NFL still somehow, but even we see tanking there. I think the NBA, just because of how important good players are, is especially constructed in this way. And I think kind of some radical changes are in effect where you decouple draft positioning from win and loss record entirely. And that may suck for small market teams like the Jazz, but I think there are ways you can make it okay. And I think there are ways you can, at least incentivize them to try their hardest, even understanding that there are going to be, 15 teams with a below 500 record every year.
So prior to 2004, I probably could count on one hand how many soccer matches I'd watched, right? So anyone who would ever mention promotion relegation I would meet them with the typical American sports fan. Listen, communists, stay out of our sport. Okay, it works over there, but leave it over there. So, 21 years now of watching, covering soccer and growing into a place where I very much enjoy it, like it, understand it. Promotion relegation rules. That's my opinion. And I think it should be used in college football. I think it should be used in pro basketball, somehow in the NFL, although I'm not sure they would ever be able to do that. Do you think there's a world that, because Adam Silver's a soccer guy, he's front-facing about that. The NBA Cup essentially is modeled after, mid-season cup tournaments in the world of soccer. Do you think there's space for at least a conversation about why it makes sense? Because I think it absolutely does.
It absolutely makes sense, and the people who are in power absolutely will not go for it.
Yeah,
that's all it comes down to, right? Like, look, how often have we seen how many phases of American life are the rich people in charge? All of them. Mm-hmm. The rich people aren't going to go for this. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can move on. All right. Let's see. Any other? Oh, one more Jazz question, and then I want to get because RSL is playing right now, and they sent out their starting 11. I'm like, I don't know anybody on the team now. But before we get over to what you expect this year for RSL, I do believe, and I'll say going back to maybe mid-December-ish, we have seen legitimate steps in the right direction and progress. And I'm not a moral victory guy. I am a results over vibes guy, as I make clear all the time. But what have you seen? Like, let's end the Jazz portion here with a little bit of hope, because Will has actually changed his tone and tenor post-game as well. And they're not going to have playoff basketball. So the best way to get these young players valuable NBA minutes is play good teams competitively, which they've done. So what have you seen over the past, I'll say, month or so that has been positive in your opinion?
Yeah, I think some significant strides, especially from some young players. Like Isaiah Collier is really fun. I mean, I think I saw a stat that if he, played on a per 36-minute basis, he'd be sixth in the NBA in assists. It's rare to see like his level of vision and frankly willingness to pass the ball out of a rookie. That's especially one that was the number one high school recruit to kind of not focus on scoring and focus on setting up other players has been really, really great. I think you've seen some, obviously like John Collins and Colin Sexton are playing well when they do play. Walker Kessler has had a really, really good year, a real bounce back year from last year when he really struggled. I think you're seeing development from Bryce Sensabaugh, who looks like he could be like an off-the-bench six-man for a good team one day. I think Keontae George is, missing fewer shots and kind of figuring out, to some degree at least, which ones he can take. Still needs to play better on defense. Still, is I don't think a positive player right now, but like there are strides there where you can talk yourself into it. I think kind of up and down the roster, you can look at kind of some, even like Elijah Harkless, who's a random two-way guy that was signed 2 weeks ago, has some real defensive verve and can shoot the ball from three, and you can kind of talk yourself into him being a useful bench player in a 3-and-D kind of way. So, like, I do think there is some good stuff there. We are grading on a curve here, and the curve is against the assumption that they are one of the worst NBA teams in the league, but it is a brighter situation than it was at the beginning of November, for sure.
All right, before I set you loose, let's move over to the lads because we are here for the lads, and it's been a while since you and I spoke about RSL. And since we last spoke, Anderson Julio traded. Of course, Chicho is gone. Matt Crooks is gone as well. Gavin Beavers has been loaned out to a Blitzer club. He's in the Blitzer umbrella, but he won't be playing this year. McMath has surgery. He's out for weeks. They sign a Brazilian keeper. They bring in a bevy of other pieces that I'm just not familiar with. Shout out Diego Luna, who went Fight Club for the U.S. men's national team, is now kind of this cult hero in that community. My question to you is simple, Andy. What are your thoughts on the team after setting a club record for points and goals scored and making the playoffs, although losing in the first round, deciding to really break it down to the studs, and what are you expecting this year?
Yeah, look, I think their sales make sense, right? Like, I don't think that this was a fire sale. I think this was a case of them kind of making individual sales that make sense kind of across the spectrum. So, right, like, I think cashing in on Anderson Julio at his age, with his performance last year, kind of makes some sense. I think given that Chicho asked for a trade and had the harassment stuff and also was probably the worst RSL player in the last 3 months of the season, selling him at 29 years old makes sense. I thought, like, the Gomez sale we talked about in the summer made sense. I think the Matt Crooks departure, wanting to go back to England, wasn't a super, to me anyway, a super impactful guy at a $1 million a year salary makes some sense. What I don't love is the lack of replacements and the fact that they are currently counting on a couple of 20 and 22-year-olds, I believe, at striker and some real MLS backup quality replacements there as well from New York Red Bulls. You've got again, kind of backup quality replacements on the back line. There just haven't been any real big acquisitions to make up for these departures. And so it's like, okay, you have received a good deal of money for selling some of your best players. Now it is my expectation as a fan that you spend that money, you invest the returns from those sales back into the product. And I don't think we've seen that with the transfer values that we've seen so far. Clearly, there's a DP slot still open, and that needs to be filled. And basically, my view on RSL depends hugely on whether or not that spot is filled in a aggressive manner. And frankly, I think this team does need a $5 to $10 million transfer fee striker to work, because we saw them not work without Chicho Arango with him playing poorly last year. And I just, we saw them struggle to score goals in the playoffs and heck before then as well, at the end of the year last year. So in the end, you just need talent. The rest of MLS is getting better against you. You can't just go in and say, hey, these 20-year-old front line is going to get it done when I don't know that, that's more of a hope and a prayer than a real strategy in my view.
All right, Andy, welcome back after that adventure. Have a great weekend, buddy. We'll chat soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Spencer.
Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune. Always appreciate his time. RSL tied their first preseason match. It's over 2-2. Looks like Brian Ojeda and Dominique Markzuk scored goals for RSL. They played NYC FC, I think. 2-2, Santa Barbara, preseason soccer. You guys, I'm sure you're really pumped that I'm giving you updates there. All right, time now for the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff. For your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills, text CHECK right now to 508-777-1000. That's CHECK to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us at ESPN 700. Before we catch a break, time for your PGA Tour leaderboard from You Into Golf. They're doing a special on Callaway right now. It's the future of performance with an AI smart-faced iron set. Don't know how I feel about AI in golf, but nonetheless. Of Netflix fame, Joel Damon is shot to the top of the leaderboard at 6 under par. He's joined by Andrew Novak, Harris English, Hayden Springer, Ricky Castillo, Chris Ventura, Danny Walker, and Lanto Griffin at 5 under par. Ludwig Aberg just got a birdie. He's now at 5 under par as well. As I referenced earlier, most of the big dogs did not make the cut, but some names some names of note: Hideki Matsuyama 3 under, as is Sahith Theegala, Brandt Snedeker, Keaton Bradley, at 2 under par as well. Zach Johnson at 1 under par. Our local boy who made the cut is Zach Blair. He had a great round 1, struggled in round 2, posting to 78. He's even through 15, making him even for the tournament. That's tied for 38th. Tony Finau did not make the cut. As we scroll down a little, you know what? That's about it. There you go. That's all you need to know. Patrick Fishburne, local boy, did not make the cut as well. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. The hippest NBA writer around, Howard Beck, stops by. Coming up next, we'll have Trey Fitzgerald in studio. Lindsey Rhodes from Sports Illustrated to preview Conference Championship Sunday in pro football. Then our Friday staple, Chris Camerani rolls by at 4:30. Busy Friday show. It's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network. today is soundtracks. So yesterday for our bumps, we did songs that we hate that you might like. A lot of Train in there. But it's your turn for the soundtrack selection. And Howard's on the line. And there's a lot of pressure when Howard's on the line to choose a good song. So what'd you go with?
This was a request from our guy Howard.
Oh.
So you're gonna have to get the explanation from him.
Did you tell Howard what the deal was? Did you give him so he understood the assignment?
I did, yes. It was a soundtrack.
Okay, Howard. Who'd you go with and why?
Good afternoon. That was Locked Out by Crowded House. A slightly deeper cut, but when Porter asked for a soundtrack, I just showed my daughter, who just turned 19 today. Happy birthday to my daughter.
Happy birthday.
She's back at college, but last weekend when she was home, I showed her Reality Bites for the first time. Ben Stiller directed and acted, starred in, along with Winona Ryder, Ethan Hawke. Locked Out by Crowded House is on the the Reality Bites soundtrack.
Man, that was peak Winona Ryder back in the day. That was, man.
Oh, yeah.
Good call. What was that, 91, 92-ish, thereabouts?
Somewhere right in that range, yeah.
Okay.
92, right. I think. 93, somewhere in there. Yeah.
All right.
It's a classic.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I haven't seen that in years. I'm going to have to watch that. Good call. All right, the Jazz made a blockbuster move. Well, involving draft capital. And, at first glance, Howard, you're kind of going, all right, what exactly are we doing here? But it's pretty clear the Jazz did their calculation on certainly at least Cleveland and said, okay, the least favorable of these three picks during these drafts, certainly this year, it might be 30, 29. 2 years from now, Cavs are probably going to be good again. Who knows in 4 years, but there is a chance they traded 3 first-round picks that will be late for the potential of something special if Phoenix is bad in 2031 in the form of an unprotected first, which is kind of like a unicorn in the NBA. I get it. We won't know if it's going to work for a number of years, but what's your reaction to the trade itself, and is this something we're going to be seeing moving forward as there are 5 or 6 teams that have a ton of first-round picks over the next 7 years?
I thought this was great work by Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck and the Jazz, and good work by the Suns too, for that matter. Now, the cynical version or view through the Suns lens is, congrats guys, you found a way to somehow mortgage even more of your future by sending out a pick 6 years from now for a shorter term payoff. But the Suns just needed assets. As we know, they're maxed out salary wise. They're past the second apron. They don't have picks. They've got no tools left to use. And they took the one tool they had and broke it up into 3 other pieces that are probably less valuable, but it gives them more optionality in the short term, whether it's to package those picks to get Jimmy Butler or somebody else. Like, the Suns clearly want to make a move, maybe more than one move. And from the Jazz's side of it, okay, cool. You've now taken advantage of a desperate team, the Suns, that is all in on the present. And you've looked at their prospects for the next few years, and you said, we're going to send you these 3 picks that most likely are going to be in the 20s anyway, for the possibility that we've got a golden ticket from you. Your 2031 unprotected pick is going to become after Kevin Durant has retired. It's going to come after Bradley Beal is probably somewhere else. That may come sooner than later anyway. Devin Booker, who knows where he is by then. But the bet here is that the Suns are going to have crashed and burned and not recovered yet by the time that pick comes due in 2031. So either the Jazz have done a nice job of rebuilding by then, they're in great shape, they're winning games, maybe they're in the top 5-10 teams in the league, and they're no longer a lottery team themselves, but hey, they've got a pick that could be as high as number 1 from the Suns from this deal, or sometime in the next few years, some other team that really could use a chip like that and is maybe, rebuilding themselves. Maybe the Jazz are sending that pick out to go get a really good player from somebody in a different stage. So I love it. I think that's really good work. And to the second part of your question, yeah, the Brooklyn Nets are sitting on a stockpile of picks, and the Spurs have a bunch, and of course we know the Thunder have a bunch. You can't use them all. You just can't. You don't have – when you end up with 3 picks in one draft or 7 picks over 3 drafts, especially if you like some of the players you've got, you can't be in a perpetual churn of young guys, but it's nice to have at least a few on cheap contracts. But it's good work consolidating 3 picks that might not be the best anyway and getting, as I say, this kind of golden ticket for the future.
I was really hoping we were going to go the entire interview without you using the term optionality. I'm over it, man. I should have warned you. But doesn't it feel like that's like, I always get a kick out of like the new buzzword we're all supposed to use. Doesn't optionality feel like the new buzzword?
I know. We spend too much time talking to, team executives, and it becomes, optionality is the new culture or something. I don't know. I mean, it gives you options. It gives you flexibility. How about that? It gives you
variance, right?
Something.
I don't know. I'm just teasing you because it seems like every time I listen to somebody talk about the league, optionality is the new thing. Nonetheless, it's a good point because that's what you're looking for.
We sound smart when we say it. Optionality makes you sound smart, so it's just a good buzzword to put out there.
Let's stick with it. What does this new optionality bring to the Phoenix Suns' potential of landing Jimmy Butler or maybe another player soon?
So it was funny because people immediately put two and two together and said, oh, there it is. They just gathered all these picks because that's going to be the way they're going to incentivize some third team to take on Bradley Beal's contract. We know that the Heat don't want him, and boom, this is it. Don't blink because the Butler trade's coming. And I immediately thought, let's slow down here. There's still a lot that has to happen. One, Bradley Beal has to waive his no-trade clause. And why the Suns didn't have it removed as a condition of his trade from Washington to Phoenix in the first place, I don't get at all. They should have. But so Bradley Beal has to waive his no-trade clause again to go somewhere. And we have to have a third team that actually wants or is willing to take on his contract. I don't know who that is yet. Bradley Beal, oft injured, in his 30s, still his early 30s somehow. Seems like he should be older by now. And he's on a huge deal, and with the 2 more years left after this season. So, who's going to take on his contract? Does that team need to get one of those picks that the Suns just acquired from the Jazz? And, what are the other components of this? So there's still a lot to figure out. I think the Suns made that deal regardless of whether or not they're making a trade for Butler. They made that deal regardless of whether they're going to be able to move Bradley Beal. They made that trade because they just needed other ways to improve the roster. And so now they've got these 3 picks that they can deal. And if that gets them, maybe it doesn't get them Jimmy Butler. Maybe it gets them off of Nurkic's contract, because there's thought that if anybody's going to take on Nurkic, they're going to have to be given a first-round pick just to take him. Obviously, that alone is not what the Suns want to do. They need to get something useful back. And I like their move for Nick Richards, who they got from Charlotte. But, they need, perimeter defensive help. They still could use more playmaking. I don't know where they go with this, but I suspect that within the next 2 weeks, at least one, if not all 3 of those picks are going to be going somewhere else as the Suns make a move or two. I don't know that it's going to be Jimmy Butler, because the Butler thing absolutely positively cannot happen without Bradley Beal going out in the deal. And that is very difficult to pull off given his no trade clause and given there aren't that many teams that would want to take on his contract. So
how does the Butler thing end? I mean, I had you on the week that the trade request came down, and we discussed this, and I'm still in the camp that if I'm Pat Riley, I'm not moving him. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for Miami unless somebody decides to come to the table with a deal you just can't say no to, which, of course, happens in the league for, all the time. So maybe there's a deal out there that does make sense, but a big part of me feels like if I'm Pat Riley, I'm saying, sorry, bud, it doesn't make sense for us to move you. But he's got to go, doesn't he? When he plays, he's not invested. He's doing that thing that Kobe used to do at times where he's like, I'm just going to pass the entire game because I'm just going to, essentially not participate very much. I'm not comparing the two entirely, but you get the gist. He's late for a plane. He gets suspended again. It feels untenable. How do you think it ends?
Oh, I just don't know. This one's tough because even for a moment there, and it was a very brief moment, okay, the 7-game suspension's over. All right, he's back with the team. All right, everybody's going to just kind of soldier on until they can figure this out. And the next thing you know, he's missing a team plane and doing who knows what else that the Heat were alluding to. It's suspending him a second time. They're here tomorrow in Brooklyn. Vince Carter's getting his jersey raised to the rafters here in Brooklyn, and during that game or before the game, and the Heat are here. So maybe I'll get a feel for what's going on when I see them. But I don't, Jimmy Butler will not be here. I don't know how this goes because the next time he comes back, it's a lot harder to say, well, we'll just all, soldier on, do our thing, everybody be a professional. Well, clearly Jimmy's not willing to be a professional. Like, I think that part is clear. After a 7-game suspension, if you're going to come back and still not be a professional, it's clear you are already mentally checked out and you have no desire to play ball literally and figuratively. And I don't know where that leaves everybody because it gets really uncomfortable. It's just untenable. But to your point, there's just not an obvious deal to make. I don't know how they're getting out of this. The one thing I'm sure of, the Heat are not going to make a bad deal in the sense of taking on somebody else's bad contract, right? Like, they're not taking on Bradley Beal, for instance. They're not taking on any other long-term money that will hamper them from improving the team in a post-Jimmy Butler era. But they could decide to do a deal that at least leaves them salary cap neutral, gets Jimmy off the books, and then just maybe you just don't get much back. Like, you would love to get value for him. But I think the one thing that might be on the table, given how uncomfortable things are, is maybe they have to take a bad deal in the sense of not getting great value back. But they're not going to do a bad deal in the sense of taking on more long-term money in the form of other guys' contracts that they don't want. So I don't know, again, I don't know what the escape route here is, what the solution is. But that's a creative front office, one of the best in the league. My guess is Jimmy Butler is somewhere else by the trade deadline. I don't know where, I don't know how, but the idea of going the rest of the season with him still under contract with the Heat, but not wanting to play, creating a ruckus, creating problems, you can't do that for, 3 more months.
No, I'm with you there. Let's stay in the space of trades prior to February 6th. Moving off of Butler, moving off of that situation. It seems like every time I read a trade primer, the Jazz are involved, whether it's John Collins or Colin Sexton. I have no idea, Howard, but do you think the Jazz do anything else? And then attendant to that question, what else are you hearing that might be interesting for NBA fans out this way?
Yeah, I don't. I think probably at least the last couple of years running, when we've talked at this time of year, we've figured that there was something actually, likely, right? Like what's the point of them still having Jordan Clarkson or Colin Sexton or John Collins or whoever? I still feel like this is year 2, year 3, whatever it is of this. Yeah, I think somebody probably moves, but it's so hard to make trades in the NBA right now. I mean, one of the big questions across the whole league is the second apron and even the first apron, just the constraints in the system right now going to just make the trade deadline a dud? And that could happen. We'll see over the next couple of weeks whether teams are going to be creative enough to find a way out. You're going to need – teams are going to be looking to Detroit and Brooklyn. I'm not sure who else, maybe the Jazz too, teams with cap room where you need teams to facilitate trades because the teams that are really, at an apron, over an apron, close to the aprons, it's really hard for them to make trades. And so you need other teams that have cap room to be kind of a repository. So, yeah, of course, the Jazz have multiple, solid veteran types who might be better off somewhere else or who would be of better use somewhere else for playoff teams that are looking to kind of fortify for the stretch. But I don't have anything tangible to tell you about, anything that might happen.
Fair enough. All right. Let's move over here real quick because, it feels like Oklahoma City has a level that they haven't even reached, and it feels like they're a lot better than any other team out this way right now. Now, the playoffs are always different. It's 4 times and 7 tries. And every time I lock into a Nuggets game and Jokic is Jokic, I just feel like you have to look over there and say, with that dude, they're always going to have a shot, even though with Westbrook, Come playoff time, I just feel like there's enough data at our disposal that indicates, in my opinion, this will not work with him either starting or playing big rotational minutes, but it's worked with him during the regular season as of now. So my two-part question is, has Oklahoma City clearly separated themselves from everybody else out this way? And if not, who are the teams come playoff time that's keeping Mark Dagnall up at night?
Yeah, I mean, the doubts about the Thunder, if you had any, would probably have to do with youth, right? Like, sure, they did the typical thing that a young, great, talented team does. You get in the playoffs, you get knocked out, you come back, and eventually, you get a little further. But like, this is year 2 of them being just absolutely dominant in the regular season. They've had their playoff experience now. If you assume that Chet Holmgren will be back, healthy, thriving, in rhythm, and Isaiah Hartenstein is there, and Caruso, along with, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's, leading candidate for MVP right now, Jalen Williams, all those guys. I don't see anybody in the West that I think is built to beat them. But the way the Nuggets have been playing for the last month or so, and the way that Westbrook and Jokic have suddenly formed this amazing partnership, it is hard to rule them out. And you assume that at some point Luka's going to get healthy, but now the Mavericks just lost Lively. So you've got the defending Western Conference champion Mavericks kind of, all banged up, a lot of question marks. The Nuggets, who won the championship just a couple of years ago, we already wrote them off, and now they're storming back. And, Jokic again, like it's Jokic versus Shea for MVP. It's hard to bet against Jokic when he's still the best player in the world. And I don't entirely trust that supporting cast. And like you, I don't really trust Westbrook, especially in the postseason and especially in tight games where he might start reverting to old habits and launching bad threes. And he is shooting a career best from 3, I think, right now, but it's still like, sub-average. I don't know. I just don't know what to make of the Nuggets. So, yeah, listen, to me, it has been the Thunder since last summer, since the offseason, and it still is. I don't think anybody else is particularly close, but, we'll come back to this in a couple of weeks after the trade deadline, see if any of the others who are in the chase have made a move. And B, in the back of my mind, if I'm looking at the teams that are kind of hovering there, the Nuggets are the one that would give me the most pause if I'm the Thunder, just because Jokic is that great and because that's a team that still has the core of a champion there. I'm not quite ready to put the Grizzlies or the Rockets in that category yet, even though the standings suggest they're right there. I just don't know that they're ready to make that leap yet and knock off a team as talented and as deep as the Thunder.
Before I set you loose, I'll bounce over to the other conference and ask you kind of a similar question, because everybody still believes it's the Celtics, and I do too. But I kind of feel like occasionally if I lock into Milwaukee, the same way I feel about Denver when I watch Giannis just go beast mode, and we've seen it before. He's won a title before. They seem to have figured a little something out. Again, even though the Cavs are still doing great things at 36-7, it does feel like we're high-speed ahead to Boston, OKC. Same question. Do you still feel like it's Boston, or is there a team you're ready to say is, potentially going to beat them 4 times in 7 tries?
Everybody's starting to hand-wring a little bit about the Celtics because they've been pretty blah for the last however many weeks it's been. I'm in the camp of chalking up the Celtics' woes to championship hangover. Like like this is the normal thing, and January's the dog days of the season too. Like I just can't get that excited or that riled up about, oh my gosh, there's a Celtics crisis looming here. All their key pieces are still there from the championship team. They're still really good at their best. They may not be as locked in as they need to be, but I think they'll come around in the spring, if not sooner. So I'm not particularly concerned about them, and I think that, they're still the rightful favorites as defending champs. And the big question in the East is, like, there's a little bit of, like, can Giannis and the Bucks or can the Knicks make a chase? But I think it's really about the Cavs. I think the question in the East is really about, is this a 2-team race? Are the Cavaliers, who, they've come off their 73-win pace, they're now, I think, only on a 68-win pace or so. Are the Cavs a legit threat to knock out the Celtics? I say yes, they are a legit threat to do it. Whether or not they actually can beat them 4 times in 7 tries I don't know yet. And I think it's a really tough task for the Cavaliers. Like, I think the Cavs can make the conference finals for sure. But beating Brown and Tatum, I don't know that the Cavs have the guys to throw at those guys, right? Like, if you look at matchups, the Cavaliers' probably weakest spot is a small forward, and here you have two guys who are whatever. They're interchangeable, small forward, big forward, power forward. Jaylen Brown, a little bit of guard, but like I don't know that Okoro and Strus and those guys, is that enough to be able to throw at them? And at the other end, the strength of the Cavaliers' offense is, of course, the guards, and the Celtics just have a ton of guys to throw at them. Derek White and Drew Holiday are two of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and then even Brown and Tatum can get on them, and you've got Horford, who somehow is still a very switchable big at this stage of his career. So I would still, if the series started tomorrow, I would still probably lean Celtics, and that's no disrespect to what the Cavaliers have done. But I think Boston's still the favorite.
I do not need more social media in my life, but I very much dislike Twitter. I don't think I've tweeted outside of sharing a show in a number of months, and I have fired up my Blue Sky. Am I in for friendlier confines over on that application?
Absolutely, Spence. And I have pretty much at this stage stopped tweeting. Like I'm 98 to 99% done with the site that we used to know as Twitter. I am 100% on Blue Sky. So I invite all of your listeners to come find me there, come holler at me there. Hopefully holler nice things. It is the overall environment is much, much better. There's much less toxicity, many fewer bots. There are some bots, but many fewer. It's generally more pleasant. It may not stay that way forever because social media is social media, and
Sure.
there's nothing stopping bad actors from doing their thing. But it is a much better environment. There's no ads. It's not owned by anybody in particular. It's decentralized, and it's a lot easier to control your experience as well. There's no algorithm pushing whatever stuff a particular platform wants to push. There's no algorithm doing that. It's just a reverse chronological feed, and you control your experience. So, yes, the skies are bluer at Blue Sky, and I invite all your listeners to come find me there.
It's good to hear, and I've never, because I'm not this guy, but this conversation right now gives me the opportunity to say to you for the first time in 10 years, you never followed me on Twitter, so I'm not anticipating you follow me on Blue Sky, Howard.
I'm going to find you on Blue Sky as soon as we hang up, and I'm following you. It's the first thing I'm going to do when we hang up.
Look at that.
Promise.
Look at that. Thank you, my friend. Great to chat with you. Have a good weekend, okay?
You too, Spence. Thanks. Take care.
Great, Howard Beck. Tell you about my friends at Prize Picks before we catch a break. So here's the deal. On Prize Picks, you pick two players, and then you pick more or less on their stat projections. And if you get two right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money, depending on the square. For the NFC Championship game, they're giving you Jaden Daniels more or less than 1 yard. Why is that beneficial? Well, you get one square. You just need to get one other correct, and you can win a grip of cash. So here's some options for both of these championship NFL games coming up. Buffalo, KC, AFC Championship. Mahomes, more or less 253 yards. Kelsey, more or less 69 yards. Josh Allen, more or less 48 yards rushing. Philly, Washington, NFC Championship. As I referenced, Jaden Daniels, more or less than 1 yard to win the square. Jalen Hurts, more or less than 31 yards rushing, and simply will Saquon Barkley rush for a touchdown. Now, check Prize Picks for up-to-date player projections prior to kickoff. Don't hold me to it, but the Jaden Daniels deal is the special. So you just need to get one other, and you're going to win, all right? So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly. After you play your first $5 lineup, Prize Picks run your game all season long. We are going to preview these conference championship games coming up with Lindsay Rhodes from Sports Illustrated. Our Friday staple, Chris Camerani, in the 4 o'clock hour. But coming up on the other side, it is a new era for one of our local pro teams. I'll tell you who it is and what you can expect with the legend Trey Fitzgerald live in studio right here on ESPN 700.
have a sudden craving for animal crackers.
See, this is making me miss Limp Bizkit. We decided to let Trey Fitzgerald, who's live in studio, play along with our theme of the day, which is a song from a soundtrack of a movie he likes. And Trey is live in studio, and you are one of Armageddon's biggest fans. You just are.
It's just one of those movies that if it's on, I gotta watch till the end. I'm suddenly craving animal crackers right now.
That's the worst scene in cinema. Was it Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler? They did the animal cracker scene. Well,
yeah.
I've seen the movie. I saw it once, and I'll never watch it again.
It's left an indelible impression in your brain.
You don't really love that movie.
I do. I think it's fantastic. Steve Buscemi is maybe my favorite character when they're all asking the government for the things that they get if they save the world from this meteorite.
It's really bad, man.
Hey, we all have guilty pleasures.
We do. Music, movies, Trey Fitzgerald, maybe not your strength. But, hey, how are you, man? It's been a while.
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. So
I've missed you.
Missed you, too. Great to see you. Great to have you live in studio. What the hell? Like, obviously you're over there with the front office. I'm not in the closed-door meetings. And there's a lot to get to here in the next 20, 25 minutes or so. Club sets a single-season record for points. Club sets a single-season record for goals scored. Club makes the playoffs, loses in the first round. I will die on this hill that for about 15 or 16 matches, potentially the most entertaining soccer team that we've had here in the history of the club, truly. When Chicho was doing the Chicho thing, and obviously Andres was playing well, and you've broken it down brick by brick. What's the motivation?
Look, I think everybody from Kurt Schmid, Pablo Mastroeni, ownership, John Kimball probably agree with a certain extent of what you're saying. The Andres Gomez, that was just a deal you cannot pass up. It is maybe, I won't call it the underbelly or the dark side, but it's maybe an unfortunate aspect of the global market that we have to participate in. The fact that we are participating in it now is a good thing, right? We hate to see Andres Gomez go. We hate to see Gavin Beavers go. We hate to see Chicho go. But sometimes decisions have to be made. You've done a very good job, I think, over the last 6-8 months talking about long-term positive impacts of these moves, but short-term pain of these moves. Clearly, the Gomez transfer has benefited us financially. It allowed us to bring in Dominic Marchuk, who looks to be on a very similar path with a higher floor and potentially a higher ceiling than Gomez had.
You think he can be better than Andres?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yeah, I think he's
good.
already better than Andres.
Oh, cool. Okay, good.
And I think, for however long we get to see him in 25, 26, he's going to prove that. Scored a goal today in a scrimmage, which, whatever, it's the first preseason scrimmage 10 days in, but a good sign. He's a guy that we're going to depend on. Diogo Gonçalves, another guy that maybe didn't answer the questions in his 7 or 8 games last year. I've been quick to remind people that Jason Kreis wanted to cut Javier Morales after he came in August and played 8 games and hurt his shoulder on the Rice Eccles turf and just wasn't impressive. And then he goes through a full preseason and ends up being the club's best all-time player over the course of the next decade. Hopefully hopefully Diogo follows that path. Diego Luna, what a display the other night. This is his team now. Diogo, Dom are going to create a million chances for the guys, whoever it is up top. It's Elias Manuel, who we got in a trade from New York. He's our Anderson Julio replacement. It's Ariath Piol, the 20-year-old Australian that we announced yesterday, who's on a fast track. It's Forster Ayago, the Ghanaian that we picked up out of Nashville. Kurt is still working on guys. He and the coaching staff and his staff, I think there'll be a few more moves, hopefully. And some might be minor. Maybe they'll be major. I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you, hey, we've got a DP9 coming in 2 weeks. We're just not there yet. But despite losing, and I get that your concern and everybody's concern is 60% of the goals we scored last year during an incredible year, on paper and on grass, 60% of those goals are gone. We did go 4-4-4 down the stretch, disappointing playoff exit in the shootout again for the 3rd straight year. But the culture is strong. 23,000 minutes of guys that played last year are back this year. So really we're going to see significant changes at that 9. Whoever emerges as the Chicho and Ando replacements, great. We are going to see changes in goal. Zach McMath, I think, is getting surgery today on his lat muscle that he played through and just didn't improve. So we announced earlier this week there's a veteran Brazilian keeper that played a decade in England and Italy in the last 18 months down in Brazil. He's on his way. So those are the 2 places where there's going to be a ton of changes. But when you think about Justin Glad, Alex Katranis, Brian Vera, Brian Ojeda, Diego Luna, Emeka Anelli, Dominic Marchuk, Diogo, again, is probably the X factor, Spence, for the guy that everybody is expecting to make a massive leap from last year to this year.
So a couple things that I think would be topical for soccer fans, RSL fans tuned in right now. And I know that you, A, will not, and B, cannot tell the listeners why Chicho was suspended. I've asked everybody point blank because that's my job to ask the questions, right? But I do think there are a number of RSL fans that wonder and have been wondering why you guys will not shed any more light on what happened and why you've been tight-lipped. And this is your deal. You're the VP of comms. So why this approach when so many fans are just wondering, like, why can't you just be honest about what happened?
Yeah, you have to protect all parties, and it's just not in our interest to expose personal details, club, league details. It's a complicated web, and the best thing is just that we stay mum. And Chicho, as I think Kurt told you last week, he wanted to go back home to Colombia. That's what him and his family wanted. His boyhood team from Colombia, Atlético Nacional, who we got Nelson Palacio from, so we have a good relationship with that club. They weren't going to pay his salary, and they ultimately weren't going to buy him for what he's valued. They offered a pretty low loan fee on a couple occasions. A deal was not to be had. I think for Chicho to get the money he wants, he's probably going to have to go to Saudi Arabia or the Emirates. But those deals did not come to fruition either, and Kurt did the deal that needed to be done at the time it needed to be done. And so we're going to see him at our season opener in San Jose on February 22nd in between our 2 CONCACAF matches. And he's going to come back to Utah on July 5th. So we know we're going to have a hands full, but I would say it's a very amicable breakup between the club and Chicho. He sent me one of the nicest notes I've ever received in my almost 30 years in sports from a departing player. So there's really nothing but love there, Spence.
So let me follow up, though, with how much, because I remember when the alert popped up on my phone about the suspension, and my first thought was, this could derail the whole thing.
Yeah.
Based off of just knowing of how these things go down and, basically a lifetime of professional sports, hoping I was wrong. And I don't know that we can draw a straight line between the suspension and Chicho's play afterwards and the club struggles to get back to where they were prior to, but just how much, now looking back, we can be retrospective. We can diagnose instead of prognosticate. How much did the suspension have to do with the club's struggles, Chicho's struggles, and ultimately how much did the suspension have to do with the fact that Chicho's in San Jose now?
Yeah, I think you can draw a straight line, honestly. As a guy that loves to look at stats and trends, Spence, the suspension came just a few weeks right around the same time as the Andre sale. So those two things, in my mind, are almost inseparable. And, the team had a 15-game unbeaten streak, club record. I think it tied a league record. And then that hits, and it took us time to figure out. It's much like the year before when Pablo Ruiz went down. There's a pretty straight line in the goal production, the wins, the ties, the results. So I think it's fair to say pre-suspension / sale and post. And I think everybody from Kurt, Pablo on down is still very confident that with the guys who are left in the locker room, the guys who are coming in, the guys who came in, we did a lot of roster retooling in August with Javane Brown, Lachlan Brook, Diogo Gonçalves, Dominic Marchuk. Those guys are going to be invaluable as we kick off here in CONCACAF in 4 weeks.
You're not going to like this. Better player, Jesus Ferreira or Chicho? Who would you take?
Ooh, wow, that's an interesting. I know where you're going. Look.
But before you, let me just explain to the audience why I'm asking this. Okay, so Seattle sends $2 million GAM. Shout out to GAM. Got to have some GAM. An international roster spot and Leo Chu in exchange for Jesus Ferreira. And you guys, in exchange for Chicho, received what most people believe is pennies on the dollar. I'll use Dunny's term, $1.4 million GAM and an international roster spot. So, when you compare those two, and Kurt didn't love the question either, it doesn't seem like you guys receive fair value for a player as good as Chicho.
Well, and I guess you have to probably look that if you're in the league and again maybe outside the league, and I'm not in Kurt's phone 24 hours a day, but I think you have to maybe accept that Chicho is a distressed asset, and that's why he had to take the deal that he had to take and make when he did. Now, that international slot, based on our draft picks and based on all the players that we're bringing in, is valuable. That's $250. I know it still doesn't get the total financial value of the deal where we all think it should be based on the Chicho that we saw, who scored 17 goals in 20 games prior to his 4-month drought post-suspension and post-Andres sale.
So when you could draw this conclusion, and I'm going to let you speak to it instead of completely believing that this is the deal and putting my feet in the cement, but we could go down the list. We already have Chicho, Andres, Anderson, Julio. And look, all these deals have to be analyzed separately. I understand that. Matt Crooks takes off. You transfer Gavin Beavers to a Blitzer-owned club, a Dutch club. And I don't know why Zach decided to have surgery today as opposed to a few months ago, but we'll leave that aside. You could draw you could draw the conclusion that something in that locker room must have been off. Now, that's not what Pablo's known for, right? He's known as a locker room guy, and I think his players really like him. But is there any validity to the group of people that seem to be saying, like, all right, well, these guys must have not liked playing with each other very much?
I understand the supposition and from people on the outside, because this has been probably the most volatile offseason we've had in a long time of incoming. I think between RSL and Monarchs, we had 22 new guys come in and 15 new guys go out.
Oof.
Now, that being said, out of our first, let's say, 18 on the MLS side, you're losing 2 guys at the 9 and let's call it 2 guys at the 1 at the goalkeeping position. So there's a lot of stability in between. I've not seen a fractured locker room.
Good. And you're in it. I mean, you would know. Yeah.
I think we have good guys, good character guys that fight for each other, guys that care for each other. And we heard Pablo a couple weeks ago. I think, look, just like David Ochoa, just like Chicho, just like Savarino, just like everybody in between, Pablo is the greatest advocate, father figure, mentor, teacher. He's walked in those shoes. Nobody understands what a professional athlete goes through better than Pablo. He played in 2 World Cups. He moved all over the country. He raised a family throughout all this as the league was growing. He turned down opportunities to go play in Europe. And then in his decade or so of coaching, he's seen a lot. He's done a lot. I think what I would say is that Pablo is always in your corner, and he's usually the last guy in some of these guys' corner. And then at some point, it's time to move on. And so I think the world of Pablo. You know this. I love the staff that he's got. A year ago, he was dealing with an entirely new staff. Now he's got everybody back, all the assistant coaches, the video analysts, the trainers, the video team, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know, man. I'm glass half full. I expect big things from this team, this locker room, this club this year, starting with a home and home with a team in Costa Rica called Herediano and CONCACAF Champions Cup. Our reward for winning that series, which won't be easy, is a home and home with the LA Galaxy. And this is all when MLS is starting up. We could have 4 home games in 10 days between February 26th and March 8th. We've got Seattle, we've got San Diego, we go to San Jose, I think we go to St. Louis. So we play every Wednesday and Saturday, Spence, potentially 19 times in the first 74 days if we can make a deep CONCACAF run. I understand that's a big if, but I think we're deep enough to make it happen.
Vegas disagrees.
Okay.
Odds to win MLS Cup plus 5,000 for RSL. That puts you in the same spot as Nashville and Montreal, right ahead of DC and Toronto. So I wonder how, if at all, these decisions have affected the business side of the sport, because that's always something you need to talk about.
Yeah.
Are you selling tickets? Are you selling sponsorships? Have any of these decisions affected the business side of RSL?
First, Vegas also thinks SGA is an MVP favorite over Joker.
You don't do Jokic stuff today. I don't have you on to do Jokic stuff, okay? No.
Very, very disappointing. Number two, to answer your question,
Shea should win it
we've
this
sold.
year,
No way. Not after last night.
Hey, I've been giving them love, just so you know.
We've sold nearly 2,000 new season tickets this year.
Good.
So well ahead of projections. We are actually very close, I think, to having to put a cap on season tickets so that we can still sell the groups,
right?
Still give first-time buyers the experience that they deserve to experience our stadium.
Shout out Matt Rader.
Our atmosphere. On the sponsorship side, I want to say we have a 97% renewal rate on the corporate sponsorship side. Clearly, that space is changing. We have new competition now with the hockey club, which we're big supporters of. But the short answer is no. None of these on-field moves have affected our off-field success.
Right.
We expect to sell out every game again this year. There are Wednesday nights when school is in session in March and October that might be a little tougher than others, but the Leagues Cup is going to have a new format, so we're not sacrificing a full month of selling seasons. Those Leagues Cup games are probably going to be midweek in August, when we're able to bring groups and able to bring families and kids out without sacrificing their lifestyle.
No, that's great. Go start Russell Westbrook in the playoffs. See what happens. No, I know we used to get phone calls when we would transfer Yaphet Soto or Duke Hashimoto. So I'd imagine when you transferred Chicho, people were like, what are we doing here?
Yaphet Soto, what a reference. He is the head coach of the Herediano club in Costa Rica.
Can we get Yaphet Soto on the show?
We can try. I actually think
English?
They won. That was going to be my next thing. They did win their winter season, and I think he's been bumped up from head coach to general manager now, effectively. But
excellent.
What a cool tie to have as we go back into CONCACAF for the first time in 10 years.
All right, let's stay in the space for a moment. A couple minutes left. What is CONCACAF? Why should people care?
It is a Continental Cup competition. We, along with, I think, 8 other MLS teams, Canadian teams, Mexican teams, Caribbean teams, we're all competing to win a big trophy, money, a spot in the Club World Cup, and a spot in another FIFA Club Cup competition. I think it's called the Intercontinental Cup. So if there's ever a time where you want to see Real Salt Lake go play against Manchester United, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, whoever, the biggest clubs in the world, you have to win this competition. And we get to take down, hopefully, not only LAFC and LA Galaxy and Seattle, and Miami and Messi, but also potentially like Tigres, Club America, Chivas de Guadalajara, like the biggest clubs in North America.
Is Miami ever coming here? Like while Messi's playing, it feels like. And look, I know it's a different league, and I get pushback all the time when I say, "Hey, the 2009 RSL team." But when Beckham came over to MLS, the deal was everybody needs Beckham in their market multiple times. Why?
It's probably easier when there were 12 teams in the league than 30, which there are now.
But shouldn't there be something in place where everybody gets a Miami home game?
Well, to your point, after this year, I believe Denver and Salt Lake City are going to be the only 2 markets not to have seen Messi. And in the league's defense, and we've been promised Messi, and those promises have been broken. But as the league has added expansion teams, St. Louis a couple years ago, now San Diego this year, it makes that formula harder to enforce each and every year. But to your point, there is the sense of a closing window. Will Messi be here after next year's World Cup? And who knows? Hopefully we have an opportunity to welcome Messi in Miami in 2026, either before or after the international windows.
This league is so dumb. We need you back at the league office, or maybe I just need to stop doing radio and take Don's job, because there's so many things that seem to be so obvious. But, of course, I come through this with the prism of what would benefit us here in Salt Lake. All right, before I set you loose, I'm putting you on the spot. First choice starting 11 for Pablo this year is what? back to front.
Real quick, I'm ready for Garth Lagerwey to take Don's job, so we'll see if that happens.
Oh, man, that would be awesome.
In 2028 or whenever.
Garth would be an awesome
I love
commissioner.
Don, but I think Garth should be the next commissioner. Anyway, topic for another day. First choice 11 for RSL would be the new Brazilian goalkeeper. His name is Rafael Cabral, won the Copa Libertadores earlier in his career. Justin Glad at center back, Brian Vera at center back.
Real quick, Glad with the captain's armband this year?
Glad could have a dark horse competition maybe from Emeka Anelli.
Oh, that would rule.
Who
Shout out
knows?
Nate Bench.
We'll find out, where Emeka's head and body are at when he comes back from U.S. camp, which he's going to join the team Sunday, I think, from the U.S.
So we got Vera and Glad center backs.
Got Vera and Glad. Probably, that right back spot is going to be a competition between Javane Brown, Bodie Hidalgo, Kobe Henry, the 20-year-old American that we just brought back from France, has had a very impressive. So I think that's open competition. Alex Katranis, obviously, on the left, overlapping. The pivots would be Ojeda and Anelli, but an interesting competition because you have Pablo Ruiz back in that role and Nelson Palacio
a lot
there.
of depth, yeah.
And when you have games every Wednesday, Saturday for 2.5 months, you want to have that kind of depth.
Mm-hmm.
On the left side, we did talk about Katranis. You've got Diogo and Diego as your 10s. You've got Dominic Marchuk out on the right, and then probably your striker up top. Still a very open competition between Ariath Piol, who we just signed from Australia, Forster Ayago, the Ghanaian that we got from Nashville, Elias Manuel, the Brazilian that we traded for from New York Red Bulls. Those guys got to battle it out. And what I love about this roster, Spence, especially if we do play games every Wednesday and Saturday, there's plenty of minutes to go around because everywhere you look, you've got 3 or 4 bodies for 2 or 3 positions in different part of the field. Even if the Brazilian goalkeeper, let's say, gets hurt, you've got a 27-year-old from Orlando named Mason Stuyduar. Hasn't played a ton, but he's been around the league. He's won CONCACAF games. He's a very good backup to have with Gavin Beavers gone.
You got to sign a striker, man. And I know Kurt said it doesn't matter if it's $5 million or $100,000. It matters.
Yeah,
you got to sign it. You got to sign a striker.
That.
Well, hey, great to see you.
Great to see you.
It's too bad that I found out you don't value winning because Shea should be the MVP, but it's fine. It's fine. You're a homer.
I mean, he can have it. Joker's got bigger fish to fry, like a title and a finals MVP. Another one.
You know what? I hope that for you. But Russell Westbrook starting. It's not going to work, pal.
He's changed. Jokic has changed. Joker has changed him.
Yeah,
He'll change Ben Simmons next year.
Yeah, take your ex-wife back for the 7th time. See how that works out. Great to see you, my friend, okay?
Wow, I don't even know what that means.
Pro football coming up next. Our good friend Lindsey Rose from Sports Illustrated. Keep it here on ESPN 700. Is this your first official selection for our theme today, or did you allow Lindsay to pick her song? What do we got?
No, I didn't get the memo to Lindsay quickly and quick enough. On the road again, obviously Willie Nelson. A bunch of movies this one was in. Forrest Gump, Shrek.
All right. Okay, well, as long as it's from a movie soundtrack, that's the rule on the show today. Chris Camarati from The Athletic will join us in about 25 minutes from right now, but let's do a little pro football. Conference Championship Sunday is upon us, and our friend Lindsay Rhodes is back on the show from Sumer Sports. Lindsay, happy Friday. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm happy it's Friday, too.
I appreciate your time today. And before we get into the games, and that's where we'll spend the bulk of the time, I just wanted your thoughts on some of the coaching news that's come down as of late. We'll start with Pete Carroll to the Raiders. Lindsay, what do you think? How do you think this is going to work out?
I think I like it. I feel like it's an interesting fit for where the Raiders are in their roster building process, I guess, based on what they have. Like, I think, there was a lot of excitement there in the last couple of weeks thinking that they might land Ben Johnson. I never necessarily thought that made sense for someone who was trying to be a first-time head coach and had been pretty picky, had a pattern or an established history of wanting to choose this first spot pretty carefully. It makes a lot more sense that he would go to Chicago, which I know sounds weird to a lot of people because the franchise has been a mess for a long time as well. But at least I think they have a quarterback and a lot of offensive pieces, frankly, that I think were not used ideally this year. And so I think he could be set up for success there. I think somebody like a Pete Carroll, it kind of makes a lot more sense for, because he can come in and doesn't really have like his entire coaching future resting on it, and has obviously a long history of professionalism, being able to field competitive teams. And I think that he'll probably build a team that is in his likeness, kind of, he's a more run rate over expectation type of guy. And so I'm maybe thinking that if they go out and draft themselves a running back at some point and kind of build that way around him, a running back and a tight end, Brock Bowers, that they have there, I think that could be an interesting offense to keep an eye on next year. And I think that the defense, honestly, finished really, really strong this year. So they might be headed in the right direction on that side of the ball already.
So, Lindsay, I've made some unfortunate choices in my life. I'm not going to run from that. And one of the most unfortunate choices I made as a young person growing up in the Northeast is I decided to like the Jets. It was a dumb thing to do then. It's a dumb thing to do now. And I suppose the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I'm not knocking on Aaron Glenn. It just feels like a movie I've seen before with a first-time head coach in a defensive background. But how do you think this could work out for my unfortunate, long-suffering New York football Jets?
Yeah, first of all, my condolences.
Thank you.
I know it's been rough. I know people feel really strongly about not switching teams, though. That's been quite a debate in the last, couple of weeks.
For sure,
on social media channels.
Mm-hmm.
So good for you for sticking with it.
Thank you.
So I don't know. I don't know Aaron Glenn personally. And my thing about head coaching candidates is I think you really do need to talk to people who have been in the space with the people. I think it's such a different set of skills than it even requires to be a good offensive coordinator. So obviously we know he's a good football guy. We know he can build out a really strong defense, come up with game plans. He can metabolize losses, get new guys up to speed. We've learned a lot of things there in Detroit about Aaron Glenn. The one thing that we don't know about him, but have heard from people who do, is that, he's a guy who, you want to run through a wall for, and that he can get you motivated and all that kind of stuff. I just feel like there's such an unknown to people about how they're going to be head coaches until they actually are head coaches, because it requires you to manage games in a way that's different than calling plays for a game and coming up with a game plan. Like, the game management stuff is totally different. There's so many examples in recent years about people who are first-time head coaches that don't call timeouts at the right time, don't make those types of decisions in a timely fashion, can't get the play calls in quickly. That kind of stuff is so different than the stuff that they do as coordinators. And I think that this year, more than I can recall, I feel like what I think works as a head coach kind of was born out in terms of modern head coaching. For so long, it was Bill Belichick. This is the gold standard. The way he did things was so different from a lot of people, but kind of that gruff, sort of approach, like do it my way or the highway type of thing. I think that worked as a head coach for a really long time. Now I think it's more like Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell and the kind of stuff that we saw from them, where clearly they've got the football stuff down, but they understand how to motivate people right now and make them feel empowered by kind of making them feel like they trust them, right? And obviously the standards are high, and it's not like they're just like letting people run willy-nilly in their organization, but I just think that there's a different way of empowering athletes in the year 2025, and I don't know who has that until they actually kind of, stand on the sideline and start doing it. So I don't know what to tell you about Aaron Glenn, but from a football standpoint, he certainly seems to check the boxes, and the people who knew him in Detroit seem pretty excited about it. So maybe, fingers crossed, what are you going to do at quarterback? Who knows?
So we are not the happiest of football fans on this show overall, because Jets fan for the host, Cowboys fan for the producer. What do the Dallas Cowboys do now? They clearly have slow played this, and it feels like most of the best prospects are off the board as far as who they could hire.
Oh, wait, the Cowboys slow played something? Hold on, wait. I just want to make sure that I got that clear, because they usually are so quick to make these decisions. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they slow played the Mike McCarthy thing so much that I think they left themselves behind the 8 ball, seemed very caught off guard with the fact that, things have gone in the direction that they've gone in since then. I don't know. I always think that the thing you have to ask yourself when even fans are talking about replacing a coach is, and with whom, and I thought it was pretty obvious that Mike McCarthy that things were headed in this direction pretty early this season, frankly. And so the fact that they didn't seem to come up with a real strategic game plan for how to replace him is somewhat shocking, but also it's not shocking because I think Jerry Jones is really consistent in the way that he hangs on to things and waits till the last second with contracts, with this. And so I don't know who they're going to get. My fantasy co-host, I do a fantasy podcast for Sports Illustrated called Fantasy Dirt. Michael Fabiano is a hardcore Cowboys fan, and so I have to listen to him rant and rave way more than I would like. And he is convinced that it has to be Dion at this stage of the game, just because kind of the bigger candidates are all sort of wiped clean. And so I will say I have no idea if Dion, what that would look like in the NFL, but I do think it kind of makes sense. It feels very Jerry Jonesy, doesn't it? And if there's anybody who can stand up to Jerry Jones, it does feel like it might be Dion. That said, I don't know what kind of NFL coach Dion will be. I wish I had a more clear-cut and optimistic answer. Like, this is going to happen, and you're going to be so much happier in the future. And I don't know if I have that for you.
Yeah, look, when we subscribe to the golden rule around here, Lindsay. The man with the gold makes the rules, and Jerry is the man with the gold. So he makes the rules. I just don't see them ever getting back to what they were once upon a time until somebody else is in charge. And as long as Jerry owns the team, he's going to put himself in charge. He makes that clear every time he's asked about it. Before we get to the games on Sunday, let's look back on a couple of different storylines. And I wonder, like Lamar's he's so good and he's so fun and there's so much to like. But every time he loses in the postseason, we all have to do the thing where it's like, is he ever going to win the big one? There are plenty of examples of quarterbacks, and the one that everybody keeps throwing around is Peyton Manning, who started out with a rough postseason record, ended up with a couple of Super Bowls. The playoff record is what it is. I'm not one that believes wins and losses is a quarterback stat. That's just me. But what's fair to say about a player that might win another MVP, but yet just simply is part of a team that can't get it done in the postseason?
Well, I mean, I think that the win-loss quarterback thing in the postseason is just so hard because you are going up against really, really good teams at that stage of the game. And so it really does become more about the entire team. Like, you cannot expect when you're facing the caliber of teams, like when you're facing the Bills, and who, by the way, have another MVP candidate on the other sideline that people have the exact same expectations for. When you lose a game like that in narrow fashion, it just feels like, are we really going to go down this, go down this road where we're going to freak out about the fact that he can't get it done in the postseason. It just feels like from a narrative standpoint, we kind of are way too extreme as far as that's concerned. And was it his best game of the year? Not at all. Was it as bad as people even talked about? Not at all. Because the things that he did to keep the Ravens in that game, like the ways that he contributes to the points that they put on the board and is the reason that they're putting up those points, there's such a strong argument for Lamar, statistically speaking, all season long for the value that he brings to the Ravens. I don't believe in devaluing somebody because they don't get it done in that last game of the year, when that last game of the year happens to be the postseason against a team who was, by the way, a higher seed than them. Like, I just think that we tend to overreact to some of those things.
Totally agree. Wanted to stay in the space of what has happened prior to get to what will happen coming up on Sunday. And, we don't have an NFL team in Salt Lake, but we have an NBA team, and they've been operating for 51 years now. They've never won a championship. And so whenever there's a city that is long suffering with a team that looks like they have a chance to break through, I tend to kind of cheer for them a little bit. And the Detroit Lions, man, like those fans, like, you just feel so bad because they were so good, they were so fun, they were so awesome, but they were also very injured defensively. And you knew that at some point, if a team was able to formulate an effective game plan on offense, the Lions were going to have to probably score 40, 45 points to win. And that ultimately is what they needed. They didn't get it. We'll get to the Jaden Daniels storyline, but what do you make of the Detroit side of this? And do you still think they have a window open, even though they just lost both their coordinators?
Yeah, I mean, it's the loss of the coordinators that would kind of give me pause moving forward. But I think that they have such a strong culture and like workplace environment that they have built since Dan Campbell has been there. I think that they have assistants that are there in the building that are kind of the same mindset, and maybe it will be, I mean, look at the Rams, for instance, and how many coaches have been pilfered from that coaching staff since Sean McVay got there, and they've been fine, relatively, right? I mean, I realize they have, not won another Super Bowl since that one, but they've been consistently competitive, and the things that make the Rams have continued. So I do think that it really does start from the top there. And the culture that Dan Campbell has created there, I think, is one that they will be able to maintain. The talent is, I mean, it's up and down the roster. They're so good the way that they've built that team out from where they started to what they have now has just been incredibly impressive. I think that Dan Campbell is like my ideal head coach in the NFL right now because of the way that he has embraced how to be aggressive. I work for Sumer Sports. It's a data company. So clearly from an analytics standpoint, I'm looking at a lot of numbers, and I love the fact that he looks at the fourth downs the way that he does and says, look at how many extra chances we're going to have throughout the year to put points on the board, and then is able to do that. I mean, the rate at which they outscored their opponents this year was wild. They were plus, why is this coming up now? I'm not having a hard time finding it. Plus 222 in terms of scoring margin. And the next closest, I want to say, was 160, plus 160, the Eagles. I mean, that's insane. That's so many, like, and I know some people will look at that and say, oh, well, they shouldn't be running up the score. I'm kind of the mind that that's how you build a team that can compete in the postseason. Is you look at every single game, you do exactly what you are capable of doing in that game. You never take your foot off the gas. You never play down to the level of competition. And by the way, I mean, the people who talked about them running up scores in games, look at the attrition that you mentioned and the number of pieces that they lost, and they needed to get those guys reps. And they got those guys reps, and they never really saw a dip in play until that last game of the year. So, and by the way, I kind of think that in some ways, Jared Goff just had a bad game, right? Like slight anomalous things. And is Jared Goff having a bad game against a very good team anomalous? You could argue that for sure. But I think that, everybody has bad games every once in a while. He had it in a particularly bad week. And I think that they will be back next year, and I will be very curious to see how the new coordinators play out. But I'm optimistic that they'll be able to keep it going.
All right, with our remaining time, let's analyze and preview the games ahead, and we'll start with the early game on Fox, Commanders-Eagles. Reminder to our audience, you can hear the game on our radio station as your home of the NFL in this market. Philly's getting 6, the over-under 47.5. And I got to say, Lindsay, a lot of people I'll call smart football people that I respect seem to be leaning the Commanders' way, at least minus the points, maybe just winning all the way. Now, rookie quarterback's never done what Jaden Daniels could potentially do, and that storyline has been unbelievable. I just have a hard time, and this is kind of how I always am when I try to prognosticate instead of diagnose. If I've seen you do it before, I'm likely to believe you can do it again, and I just haven't seen it with Washington like I've seen it with Philly. So I'm taking Philly. I don't know that I feel great about it. What do you make of the first game on Sunday?
Yeah, I think, honestly, fast forward to I have a hard time picking either of the games, which is, I think, a great sign for us as fans in terms of what we're about to see, because they could easily go either way, and there are arguments to be made for both sides. I think I'm like you, and that I lean Philadelphia because of the experience, because of just the overall roster, top to bottom. They've been going through a few things lately on offense in particular. The fact that the passing game has not been as successful as you would like at this stage of the season, the fact that they haven't really been able to get A.J. Brown involved. I mean, he has 3 catches on 10 targets for 24 yards in the postseason. That's wild. But what's also wild is that they've done that and they've still won those games. So if they are able to get him going against a Washington defense that has not been particularly good this year, they were 27th in EPA per play against during the entirety of the season. So if there's a weakness that it kind of exists in this game, it is that Washington defense, and then it is the Philadelphia passing offense, but only lately. On the season, that has not been a particular weakness. I think they're 9th overall in dropback EPA on the season, but then, it falls to 21st since week 13 minus week 18 because that week is weird. Anyway, I think that matchup will be very, very interesting to see if Philly can get the pass offense going. As for the Commanders offense, I feel like there's such an interesting unknown component to them. I feel like the offense is just in such a constant state of evolution. And I think that that's tied to Jaden Daniels. And I think that's probably why a lot of people are leaning towards them, because they're getting better and better and better and better and better as the season goes on. I mean, Jaden's EPA, expected points added, last week was 20.5 himself. So that is an insane number for one player to bring to the table. I think that Cliff Kingsbury, one of the things that frustrated me early in the year was the way that they run that offense. Everything was kind of static so that they could go fast. And Terry McLaurin, and this is a thing that we always see with Cliff Kingsbury's offenses, is that he takes that number 1 wide receiver, he locks him down on the left side, left wide receiver specifically. It happened to DeAndre Hopkins. It happens consistently. So I was looking for that at the beginning of the year. Terry McLaurin came out of the gate playing like 80% of his snaps in one static spot, running his routes out of one spot. And it always confused me that defenses, like, why would you do that? Because defenses know exactly where he's going to be. Well, after the bye, that number came down to 60%. They're moving him around a lot more. They're using more motion. There's a lot more just evolution, I guess, for lack of a better word, with the offense. And I think that makes it much harder to defend because they're constantly adding new wrinkles as Jaden gets more experience. And so that makes this one tougher to handicap.
You are very good. You're very detailed, but this is not a podcast. It's live radio. So I do have to put 30 seconds on the clock, Lindsay.
Sorry.
No. It's believe me, I prefer podcast formats, which is why as a live radio host, my interviews tend to go 20, 25 minutes instead of 7 or 8. But unfortunately, we've got to pay the bills. So 30 seconds, as far as the Chiefs and the Bills, how do you think it plays out?
I'm going to lean Bills. I think it's going to be really important for Buffalo to find a way to run the ball successfully in order to get the defensive looks that they want, ideally some single high so Josh can take some shots downfield. Looking for Trent McDuffie and whether or not he follows Khalil Shakir to the inside. I think that the Chiefs would probably feel pretty okay about the matchups that they'd get there if that was the case. And then is Kelsey going to be like he was last week? I think that that's a really big thing, because I think that they're going to try and attack the middle of the field quite a bit. And that feels very Kelsey-ish, and maybe a little bit of extra Noah Gray. And then I'm looking for your betting fans out there, maybe I think Samaje Perine receiving props like at 8.5, and receiving running backs tend to have some success against the Bills, and he is the guy that they tend to throw to if they throw it all to the running back. So I keep an eye on that.
Where can people go find your work, Lindsay?
The Sumer Sports Show podcast, once a week. We come out every Tuesday, work there. And then you can find me on the Twitter at Lindsay_Rhodes.
You're a radio host dream. We're going to have you back on. I'm just going to ask 2 questions and get out of your way, Lindsay. Enjoy the game, okay? Enjoy the game.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm serious when I say it was awesome. I wish you had more time. Enjoy the games, okay?
Thank you two guys.
All right, Lindsay Rhodes. Ooh, did you hear it at the end? You heard it at the end, right? You caught that at the end, right? No, I'm just, I always want to just be aware of the people that are on the show, and they have no idea who they're talking to, and they always tell on themselves at the end when they say, thanks, guys. There's one guy, okay, who just interviewed you for 20 minutes, okay? So we're tracking these things.
Okay.
She's smart, though.
She's good.
That was really good.
Yeah, she's one that I've been trying to get on for a while, but does a show during the afternoon sometimes, so good to get some insight.
No, that was good stuff. All right, new year, new you, save money, new budget. Call Ryan from the Dish Bros, 801-424-DISH. Wireless, internet, cable TV. Ryan, how can you save our listeners some money, my friend?
Yeah, I tell you, we do our homework and we put in the extra effort. We've got a really neat tool that Dish gave us where there's some individual offers that get mailed out to people. And if you're like me, you probably toss most of your mail just in the garbage can, don't even look at it. But Dish does send out individual offers that have a special gift card in there. And this goes above and beyond the Dish offer. And we now have a tool that when you call in, I can check and see if you got one of those recently. And if you did, we can apply a several $100 gift card to the offer. So listen, take advantage of that. If you see one of those white envelopes say Dish on them, open them up. They have a neat offer. It has my name and address on there. Some of them might have my phone number, but just whatever you do, don't call an 800 number. Call 424-DISH as always. But guys, here's the thing. With that or without that, Dish is still crushing it. This offer right now, we can throw in Netflix free for 2 years. Guys, that is a huge offer. It is built into the system along with you can have all the other streaming apps. This makes it simple, turnkey. You can watch what you want to watch and have one remote. Plus, it works on all your TVs. You can have access to all your DVR recordings. And, yes, it's cheaper than streaming. A lot of times we see this, and especially with this massive rate increase that YouTube TV slapped out there. Guys, have a bigger, faster DVR. Don't worry about your DVR recordings getting deleted. Call us up, upgrade, get a price guarantee. That's important. We'll throw in movie channels. I'll throw in dinner at JCW's. Netflix free for 2 years and have you install as early as next day. Ask about the internet solutions we have. Half a dozen different companies out there. Guys, fiber, $35 to $45 a month. I've got a 5G product. You can get a gift card. You get set up with that. There's really lots of solutions. There's no reason you should just be stuck with that cable bundle where they're just rolling you over and just taking your wallet. Call us. Save yourself thousands, and I'm not kidding about that. Call 424-DISH, 801-424-3474.
All right, time now for the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff. Time for your chance to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text contest right now to 508-777-1000. Text contest right now to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us here at ESPN 700. All right, coming up on the other side, our Friday staple, Chris Kamrani from The Athletic. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. go Andy today. At 6 o'clock on a Friday. Time now for our Friday staple. Porter, I don't even need to ask you whether or not that was your choice or CK's choice. That was clearly Chris.
That's our guy.
Christopher Camerati, happy Friday, sir. How are you?
Great job picking the musical theme of the day, I must say. It was probably the most difficult decision I've had to make in a very long time.
Okay, well then, if I can confuse you, Christopher, I know that I've done my job. Happy Friday, buddy. How we doing?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad it's Friday. It's been a busy week, but time for the weekend, obviously. I don't know that I've ever even asked you this. What's your level of interest in pro football, NFL football? Will you be dialed in on Sunday?
I will be dialed in tangentially, meaning like I will be playing with toys and cooking dinner and paying attention every once in a while. The brilliance of YouTube TV, and I don't know if you're a subscriber, Spence, but you can put it on basically any Black Mirror that you have. So it doesn't need to occupy your television. It can occupy your phone or your laptop, which often it does while I'm, researching ways to cook meals. So long-winded way of saying I'll be paying attention, but it's a lot of football, man. So I don't know how I wouldn't say I'll be locked in.
Fair enough. Because you don't do much. Have you ever covered the NFL? I mean, mostly you're kind of a college football guy based off of your writing, yes?
Yeah, never covered the NFL. Most of my entire professional career has been here, and I don't think we'll ever have an NFL team here. So the only time I've set foot in a NFL press box was covering Utah's loss to Oregon in the 2019 Pac-12 title game, because that was at Levi's, and of course covering RSL Sounders matches at the Clink.
Indeed. Ultimately, the closest thing I think we'll get to an NFL team in our market is if Utah and BYU are in the right group, on the right side of the line of delineation when college football moves into this potential pro model. That's probably the closest thing. You hate to never say never, but as far as something that might be on the horizon, because this new model, Chris, as everybody has written about and talked about, and who knows when it's going to happen, it does feel like it is inevitable. And one thing that it will do, for better or for worse, is pit the best teams in college football against each other week in and week out. I mean, that television deal is going to be crazy, and that's why a lot of private equity guys are interested in buying stakes in college football teams. That's probably the closest thing we'll ever have to pro football here.
That's what we call a transition for the kids listening at home, because our guy just took CK's RSL Sounders in the press box and wove it into a will Utah and or BYU be left in the cold.
Nice.
Great, stunning stuff.
Thank
man.
you, sir.
I'm proud of you.
Followed along. I appreciate that.
I agree with you, but I'm going to be a little bit of I don't want to say naive. I don't want to be naive here, but I don't even know what the plan is. I don't even know if there's a plan. I think there is a concept of a plan, as a guy once said recently, but otherwise there's just lots of theories that are floating around and being reported, but nothing close to concrete. So while the likelihood of this so-called super conference could potentially come to fruition, I don't know when we'll get there, if we'll get there, what the media rights would look like, who gets involved, who doesn't. All I know is that the sharks at the top are going to keep feeding, and as they should, because they're benefiting from being able to eat the most.
Speaking of a concept of a plan, the Department of Education came out this week with some Title IX guidance as it applies to the payments to athletes. Now, the Trump administration, his nominee to take over is Vince McMahon's estranged wife. I don't know much about her, but, nothing's real. And so what I've been reading is they could roll it back. But, we are moving into this reality coming up. I think it's June or July, $20.5 million in direct payments to athletes via NIL deals per school. And according to the Department of Education, and the reason why this is important is they are in charge of making sure that schools are staying compliant with Title IX guidelines. They're in charge of making sure these things are above board, or they're the ones that will come after you. And, the easiest way to explain this is if 50% of the athletes at your school are male and 50% are female, then 50% of the revenue has to go to males and 50% has to go to females. And we've heard several athletic directors publicly say we're going to allocate about 80% of that $20.5 million to football players. And according to this, they would be in violation of Title IX. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think it stands, or do you think it's going to be rolled back when Vince McMahon's estranged wife runs the U.S. Department of Education, a sentence I never thought I'd be able to say?
So are we going to tap into the vein of I enjoy 90% of the content. The show gets too woke for me about 1/4 of the time. Are we ready to tap into the 1/4?
Yeah, we haven't been woke very much as of late, CK, so bring the wokeness.
Well, as you were presenting me with that question, I got on the laptop, and of course, Linda McMahon, is former wife of Vince McMahon, who I think Linda had a huge part in the success of the WWF, now the WWE. She's the chair of the board of the America First Policy Institute. And I'm going to read you their mission statement.
Nice.
The America First Policy Institute is a 501c3, blah, blah, blah. It exists to advance policies that put the American people first. Our guiding principles are liberty, free enterprise, national greatness, American military support, foreign policy engagement in the American interest, and the primacy of American workers, families, and communities in all we do. So the mission statement is clearly about equity amongst college athletes in this new fangled world. To get back to your question, again, how is this going to be deployed? How is it going to be, who's going to police this thing? What is the policy officially going to look like? I think it makes sense. I know there's going to be pushback about should the programs that bring in the most money deserve to be able to have the most. But listen, man, we can't, as we saw early on in COVID, we can't utilize the strengths of a program at a certain school to be able to use that and contextualize getting rid of other sports and potentially getting rid of other athletes, which are often Title IX decisions that obviously come off looking very bad. So again, going back, I'm not pleading the fifth, man, but all this stuff is just way too smart for me. And I'm not a smart person. I can pontificate on who deserves what and why they deserve it, but I don't matter. I'm just a regular on the drive, man. It's Friday and I'm just chilling with my guys. So until we get some sort of concrete evidence, what the plan will be and what, Miss McMahon wants to do and really in terms of executing policy, it's all just going to be kind of conjecture.
Well, first of all, I disagree. You are a smart guy. And, we'll do one more somewhat weighty question, then we'll move on to Diego Luna's cult status with U.S. men's national team fans. But
Ready.
So I asked Amy this question, and I knew that I was about to get my head taken off, so I asked her and I ducked. But most people would say, okay, the sports that generate the most revenue should have the bulk of the revenue invested into, that product, whether it's the athletes, whether it's the coaches. And the fact of the matter is the bulk of the money does go to those programs. The highest paid public employee in most states is either a football coach. In my home state, Connecticut, it's a basketball coach because UConn's a basketball school. What is there flaw in that logic when most people look at this and say, okay, the way the world works is the football team generates the most revenue, so the football team deserves the bulk of the money to go towards them?
I think there are two trains of thought. One, obviously, yes. Secondarily, I think you will come to a model let's hope, that gives these student athletes and these sports that historically have been underfunded and aren't represented well on the fiscal plane. I hope they'll get more than they previously had. I'm just looking at this from a totally logical point of view. I have a really hard time thinking that it will end up being a 50-50 split. And I'm not saying what's right, wrong, or indifferent, because I'm not judge, jury, and executioner. But like, ultimately, a lot of these athletes also deserve to be compensated. Who is going to be the judge? Who is going to bang the gavel? Like, I do think basketball and football will be king. And at some schools, like, women's basketball will have a say. Schools like, South Carolina, Baylor, Tennessee, so on and so forth. But ultimately, I think that this is the society we live in. I mean, it's not too hard to read the tea leaves, man. I think everybody knows which way this will go. My hope is that programs and people that have historically been underfunded are given their piece of pie as well.
So I was having this debate a couple weeks ago. I emceed an event up in Park City. Rick Neuheisel was on the panel, and we were talking about the role of simply private equity in sports. Venture capitalists, a lot of very rich, powerful people were there that live in a world that I just don't and can't even relate to. And we opened up the debate as far as the recent trend of women's sports and valuations of NWSL teams and WNBA teams sky high, and WNBA ratings not just improving, like quadrupling. And yes, you do have to draw a line to Caitlin Clark. Okay, I know we're supposed to say, well, the women that came before, and all of that certainly is true, but golf needed Tiger, soccer needed Messi. It's not uncommon that one figure literally changed the landscape of a sport, and Caitlin has done that for the WNBA. My question, as we continue to tap into your expertise, whether or not you like it, is have we reached a bubble, or is this trend of money being invested in women's sports and clear attention being directed towards women's sports, does it continue to trend up?
I think it continues to trend up. I think it's too early to say whether or not there was a bubble, and if it did exist, if it's burst or not. I mean, Caitlin is going into her second year as a professional athlete in the WNBA. And granted, there really isn't anybody who will have been able to captivate a national audience the way Caitlin did during her time at Iowa. I mean, shoot, dude, she was in the box with Taylor at the Chiefs game. She's the real deal. And I agree with you. It does sound kind of, as my guy would say, reductive, but like, stars matter, and like, they will take you places, and Caitlin's definitely in that group, especially if you're talking about a sport that needs more star power and more star representation to be able to reach the fringe folk, the periphery, the folks who aren't even sports fans, people like my wife, who will, like, during her time at Iowa, she'd be like, oh, look at this Instagram reel of Caitlin Clark. Like, that stuff goes a long way. And I think, to your point, the PE guys, as you like to call them, like, they see that as a massive investment opportunity. I would hope, and maybe this is a two glass half full, I would hope that folks don't necessarily feel compelled to have to wait for the next Caitlin Clark in that sense, because it's hard, man. Like, we had Michael, we waited. I guess the overlap between Michael and Kobe and MJ wasn't that long, like, or Michael, Kobe, and LeBron wasn't that long, but like, it's hard, man. We get into this comparison game that I feel like is very dangerous and, again, reductive, and really belittles what so many people have to offer. And all you have to do is turn on the TV and pay attention. Like, it's not that hard. Like, you don't need to watch, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. It's great. I love it, but I can tune into other things. There are other sports to watch and to be invigorated by.
If I'm in the mood for a Coach Shaw pep talk, I'm turning it on, man. I don't care what you say. I'm turning it on. Is that
well? There's been a lack of those the last couple of years. But
well, I only saw, I think, the first 4 episodes of season 1, because my honest, sincere hope, and I'm not being facetious, I'm putting on my serious cap here. I thought, okay, cool. Like this show will expose the cool parts of our city and our market to a very large audience. I think they get like 10 million viewers per episode. That was my hope. And then within a few episodes, I'm like, they're not doing any of that. So I just stopped watching.
I guess I would counter, and since it's a sports talk radio, we can banter. Like, what were you hoping they would be able to showcase to the outside world?
I don't know, just a shot of Trav and Nate Bench cracking a fur to juniors, just the real people here, just to keep it real.
I mean, our guy Trey Camberling, who is back in his home state of Iowa, he coined a phrase that I always laugh at and I always repeat to him every single time. He joked about his small hometown in Iowa as the epicenter of culture. And you can, if you're talking about Salt Lake City and the huge scale of the U.S. and view it through the lens of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, we can be an epicenter of culture for people. People love it still, man. I'm telling you, my sisters in California, they're obsessed with it. They think it's the best one. So we have something going for us in that sense. But I do agree with you. It is a fairly not sanitized version. It's just kind of feels like a very Sandy Draper version of who we are.
Are you watching it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm locked in, bro.
Is Dave Rose's brother still married to that one?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, shout out to that guy. Seems like that's a tough ask in my opinion, but I'm not judging. Let's move away from this quickly. We were talking about this earlier. I had your guy Andy on. I had our guy B. Larson on, and he caught up with Lowry Markkinen and Colin Sexton, and to his credit, asked him point blank, how is this tanking stuff affecting you? And I think it's a really slippery slope when you have an awesome player in his prime to kind of take this route. Although I understand and agree with what the Jazz are doing, it sucks. But I mean this sincerely. Prior to 2004, I probably could have counted on one hand how many soccer matches I watched. Usually it was like a World Cup final or whatever. And whenever any soccer goob would be like, we should do promotion relegation in American sports, I'd be like, communists, go away in the corner, because I didn't know anything about it. And now, 21 years later, since we brought the club here, and I've very much come to a space of enjoying the game, respecting the game, understanding the game. And promotion relegation is awesome. I think it should be in college football. I think it should be in pro basketball. I don't know that the NFL has the infrastructure to do it. Do you think there's any way that any sport over across the pond here adopts this format, promotion relegation? Do you think it's ever gonna happen or even be considered?
Never, ever in a billion, trillion, gazillion, infinity years. It is not part of our culture. We are a top-heavy, obsessed with winning at all costs. Culture and context be damned. We are not capable of it. I agree with you wholeheartedly. You see what it means to players and staffers and fans when a team gets relegated, and what happens when a team gets bumped up. And it is the epicenter of bummer and bliss, man. I'm telling you, it is like the ultimate human experience watching in real time. We don't have that here. Here we have, people arguing about Taylor and Travis Kelce. That's what we are. That's who we are. And it's unfortunate, but it would be cool. It would make the stakes higher and make every single night that much more intense and meaningful. And frankly, I mean, I can only imagine. I'm of the opinion that I think it would help media ratings, because I think for a sport like basketball, people tune out for several months on end because they know that there are teams that are going to be doing load managements, and nobody cares to watch the Raptors play the Kings in Sacramento on a Wednesday night. Whereas if there was a bigger picture ramification on the line, you bet your ass people would be into it. So I don't know. That's me on my soapbox, but I never think it will happen here, but it would be really cool if it did.
RSL played today. They played a match. I didn't really know that they were even doing that. A scrimmage preseason match. 11 comes out. The starting 11 comes out. I knew 4 players. Trey popped on earlier, gave us the rundown of where we're at, and I think they need to sign a striker. They're going to rely on like 5 players they brought in, none of which have this really awesome pedigree. Diego Luna kind of announced his arrival to the dorks that love the U.S. men's national team. What do they call that group? The Sam's Army or whatever, those goobs. So now he's like this cult hero over there. So some fun things happening with RSL, but a lot of unknowns. CK, what's your expectations for the club this year?
Great pull, man. Great pull on Sam's Army. In a weird way, like, I think they had a terrible offseason, but at the same time, like, one signing I think could really change the landscape of how this season specifically goes. I am not under the assumption that any of these guys they have at the 9 position right now will pan out to be anything remotely productive. I've been proven wrong before. But if you're thinking about the exoskeleton of what you need to be a good team, RSL, they have it. They got to figure out how to let teams stop scoring 3 or 4 times every match like they did for much of last year. But you have maybe one of the best midfield tandems in Emeka and Ellie and Brian Ojeda. Diego Luna is obviously continuing to shoot up, the rankings of most talented young players in the league. But you're counting on guys that came in last year that, I think Dominic Markzuk had a decent run of form, but like you're counting on guys like him and Diogo Gonçalves to come in and be, you need them to be at the level of a Diego Luna for an entire season, and if not better, especially for Gonçalves. That's a guy who was one of the best players, on FC Copenhagen, one of the top teams in Europe for a long time. They lose an alpha in Chicho Arango. They need an alpha in the attack, and I just don't know. Obviously, Luna has that, as Mauricio Pochettino said the other night. Big balls. He just said it to Denny on the broadcast, straight up, big balls with the broken nose and playing. So Diego has it. I just don't know. Is he capable of carrying an entire attack on his shoulders for the length of a season? I don't think so. So you just need to put better players around him, and you need to have other players rise to the occasion. But this 9 by committee thing, I'm extremely skeptical about, because these are the types of guys that sometimes they pan out, but sometimes they're guys that end up playing at like Rio Grande Valley in the USL, and you never really hear from them again.
Since you brought up needing an alpha on the pitch, should we take this opportunity to offer thoughts and prayers to the family of the Bull? Shout out to the Bull.
Somebody posted like that AlphaCon poster on Twitter and was like, 3 out of the 9 people on this poster are now facing federal criminal charges in just like a year, 2 years later. So listen, man, I mean, if they have another one, God willing, we got to go, because we have to go learn from the alphas, man, because that's the only way you're going to succeed in life.
No, if they have another one, I'm going to post a series of videos painting myself as an alpha to see if I can speak, to see if they'll get 10 or 15.
Ooh, I like it, man. They'll take your kind. I don't think it would work for me. I think they would look at me and I think they would pick up and call the phone, call a number on the phone. So I don't know.
That's the meanest thing you've ever said to me. They'll take your kind?
If you lean into the character, man, you know that. That's why you said it. Come on.
All right, fair enough. Last thing, then I'll set you loose. I wanted to get your thoughts on a topic that we discussed. I think it was Tuesday. I got an email. There's this guy who emails me every day. He runs this service where he does a bunch of surveying across the country to see which state wants which team to win which game. Who's America cheering for the Super Bowl? And nearly, over 2/3 of the country anti-Chiefs. They want the Bills. And we do this thing, Chris, in sports, and it happened recently here. All of these things need to be analyzed separately, but just generally speaking, the dynamic is we tend to love you until we don't. Like Donovan Mitchell is the example I used, where that dude walked on water here. Then suddenly it felt like a lot of people just wanted him gone. And is it Taylor Swift? Is it winning? Is it all of it? Why do we do this thing in sports where we seem to love you until we very much do not?
Are we looking at this through the lens of the Mahomes and the officiating? Is this where we're kind of going?
That's probably partial. Partially that's probably one piece of the reasoning, but a lot of it's probably the attention. A lot of it's probably the winning. It's just like whatever it is. Yankees, Lakers, Patriots, individual players, just as sports fans, I don't know if it's lack of attention span or whatever it is, but we just seem to love you until we very much do not.
Well, one, I agree. I have a personal anecdote. My cousin, who's one of my best friends, grew up a Lakers fan, and he's been texting me throughout the season saying the Chiefs are getting calls. The Chiefs are getting calls. And obviously the way that the Texans playoff game went, he was like, see, I told you. And I was like, man, you got to root for Kobe Bryant for 20 years. Can you imagine how other people felt every time Kobe, who was one of the best, smartest players in the league, did his little pump fake or whatever and got to the line 20 times a game? It's the same thing, man. People just want to find something to be upset about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird that in this culture that's so obsessed with winning, that we do manage to find a way to be very, very angry at sustained success in sports. Like the Chiefs are like 15-2 or 16-2 now, and you can make an argument they haven't played one good game this year, which is insane. So maybe like they're turning it on at the right time. They probably are. But like that means that this team, if they can win a third straight Super Bowl that's never been done, like what are we mad about? And like, are we mad that Patrick Mahomes is smart enough to like, bend the rules for himself and do fake slides and do drop downs? Yeah, we can be mad about that, but they'll fix it in the offseason. They always change things every year. In the meantime, just sit there and enjoy it. But my caveat is, if you are a human being with feelings and empathy, you should be cheering for the team playing the Chiefs. Why? Because a lot of people don't know that the Buffalo Bills lost 4 straight Super Bowls at one point in the 90s, which is like the saddest thing in the world for like, which was, I think you could make an argument, the smallest market team in the NFL, and probably still is to this day. It's them or Green Bay. Like they lost 4 straight Super Bowls, Spence. Like that is insane, man. Like for a team of that stature to get there 4 straight times, which is probably unheard of anyways, and then to come up short so many times is so sad. So if you're hoping for some sort of like fairy tale ending for a fan base that by all accounts really loves its team, you should cheer for the Bills because they have a history of being very sad. But you shouldn't cheer for the Bills because you're tired of Patrick Mahomes.
Well said. Are you going to get on Blue Sky?
I got on it and I realized that it was just not working for me, so I deleted it. I can't have too many of those things, man. There's no point.
I know.
There's no point.
I know. I just fired mine up. I've been on it for a couple months. I just fired it up. I don't need more either, but I just can't get on the other thing anymore. It's just like exhausting.
Well, all you have to do, Spence, is you just have to mute and block and mute and mute and mute. All you have to do is take like 3 to 4 hours and mute keywords, and just make sure that you can just get the type of information that you want. And always, always, always avoid the for you. Always avoid the for you, and you'll be okay.
Good advice. If you saw my list of accounts that are muted or blocked, you'd be stunned. It's most everybody. But anyway, Christopher, I appreciate your time. High five to Leo, and we will chat soon. Thanks, buddy.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Chris Camerati, senior staff writer at The Athletic. Friday staple on the program. We'll do a little pro football coming up on the other side. You can hear both of the conference championship games on our radio station. And then we'll move on from there. We're going to say goodnight about 6 o'clock on this Friday afternoon/evening. Let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros. New year, new you. Save money. Budget wisely. Dial 801-424-DISH. I'm talking internet. I'm talking wireless. I'm talking cable television. Ryan, how can you save our listeners money in 2025?
I'll tell you, there is no reason you should ever call an 800 number. If you want to get set up with Dish, call us. Because we're an elite premier retailer, we actually got an extra tool, and you won't get this if you call 800 numbers. We'll actually search your name in the database, and if Dish sends out these special offers. And if you're like me, you probably take most of the junk mail, and it goes straight from the mailbox straight to your garbage can. But there's some pretty neat gift cards that they send out. These are individual offers that only are good for that particular person. And if you've lost them in the past, you just lost them. But now, if you got one, we can actually look it up and see it, add it to your account on top of the great 2-year promotion. where you get credits the next 2 years. Price is guaranteed. So you get a big fat gift card, and you get that. And no worries. If you didn't get that, I can also offer you the Netflix offer where I can get you Netflix free for the next 2 years. Guys, listen, Dish is cheaper than cable. It's cheaper than DirecTV. It's cheaper than YouTube TV is now, and some of the streaming services, if you combine them all together. It's a bigger DVR. It's the fastest DVR out there, easy to use, and plus it's capable of having streaming apps built into the system. They work on all your TVs, and you got one remote. Call us up, take the upgrade. Price is guaranteed for 2 years. You know what's going to happen with your cable, your YouTube, your DirecTV. The bill's going to go up. It's going to go up maybe twice in 1 year. That means 2, 3, 4 times in the next 2 years, you're going to see a price increase. If you switch, you're going to pay less, and you're going to have a price guarantee. Call us today. Take advantage of that. We've also got fiber internet as low as $35 a month in certain areas, if not $45 a month. This is a great offer, especially if you got fiber right now and you're spending $60, $80 a month. Guys, just pay a different provider, use the same fiber, and pay less money. It's that simple. Call us up today. Take advantage of the deals. We'll throw in dinner at JCW's. You get the best price guaranteed. 424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH.
All righty, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The 5 o'clock hour of the program on a Friday afternoon comes your way next right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? Drive at 5 time on a Friday afternoon/evening. Your commute home on this Friday starts right now. Congratulations, you made it weekend time. High five, big hugs to all of you. Way to drag your ass out of bed every morning, even if you didn't feel like it. You did the things, and now you get rewarded with hopefully some time off this weekend. A really busy sports weekend, really busy weekend on the radio station. Tomorrow, Utah men take on Baylor at the Huntsman Center. That's a 2:30 tip time. I'll repeat what I've been saying all week long. As Craig Smith said post-game after the BYU win last Saturday, fans impact winning. If you're looking for something to do on a Saturday afternoon in January, head on over to the Huntsman Center to see Utah take on Baylor. Coming up at 2:30, that game can be seen on ESPN2. You can hear it, of course, right here on the home of the Utes. Utah women rivalry game for the women tomorrow. They're taking on Brigham Young and Provo. That game also is at 2:30. Can be seen on ESPN, ESPNU, and ESPN+. Utah Jazz are idle tonight. It's a light night in pro basketball. Only 3 games. Jazz take on the Memphis Grizzlies in the Grindhouse. I think they still call it that. Before returning home to Salt Lake for 4 of 5. Here in Salt Lake, some home games for the Utah Jazz. We're inching closer and closer to the NBA trade deadline. We're inching closer and closer to the NBA All-Star break. But we're essentially nearly halfway home for most teams in pro basketball. Utah Hockey Club had a really nice win last night. They smoked Minnesota. It was a shutout for Zamelka. It's his first shutout of the year, his 6th in his career. 4-0 was your score. They're going to take on Winnipeg tonight. That game starts in about 45 minutes from right now. Pete Carroll signed a 3-year deal to coach the Vegas Raiders. The Dallas Cowboys are still looking for their head coach. And, of course, high speed ahead to championship weekend in pro football with the NFC and the AFC championship on the line. The right to go to the Super Bowl. We've been talking about these games all day long. I'm leaning towards the Eagles, but I would take the Commanders minus the points. Now, if you're not into such things, first of all, congratulations. Don't get into it. I just don't see Philly running away from the Commanders. A lot of really smart football people taking Jaden Daniels and the Commanders to go to the Super Bowl, which would be historic. And as I say on this show all the time, I don't cheer for teams or players. I cheer for stories, and that would be a great story to be able to kind of break down on the show. Both teams are relatively healthy for this game. There's no injuries as of note, although Jalen Hurts is going to be wearing a big old brace on that left knee. He's been sacked 9 times. That's the most by far of any of the quarterbacks left standing. Afternoon tilt getting interesting with the Chiefs and the Bills. The line moved, but mostly because somebody decided to wager a cool $1.3 million on the Kansas City Chiefs winning and covering at Arrowhead. So the line is now 2. But the public money outside of the wise guy big shark money is going towards the Bills. The public support going towards the Bills. By the way, Cole Bishop's going to get the start coming up for that game tomorrow as Taylor Rapp is injured. So the Bills, of course, with Dalton Kincaid, Cole Bishop, some local ties there. Kansas City is coached by a BYU alum and Andy Reid. And certainly would be historic to see the Chiefs take the Super Bowl for the 3rd straight time. It's never happened before. So, big-time weekend coming up, both locally and nationally. It's a busy sports weekend on the local scene and the national scene with a lot of NBA, a lot of college basketball, and the final weekend of pro football when it comes to multiple games, and only the Super Bowl is left coming up in February. All right, I want to tell you about my friends at Ogden Clinic Hadley Dermatology. Now, Dr. Jason Hadley joined us live in studio yesterday. Let me say this. If you are like me, and when the sun is shining, all you want to do is get outside. So I golf, I hike, I'm exposed to a lot of sun. And Jason's a friend of mine, and oftentimes he'll check in and say, hey, when's the last time you got checked out? Let's just roll through the dermatology clinic. If you are a golfer, if you're a skier, if you're an avid fan of the outdoors like Porter is, and you are exposed to sun a lot, early detection for potential skin cancer can literally save your life. So if you're looking for expert skin care, Dr. Michael and Dr. Jason Hadley, along with their skilled team, offer a full range of dermatology services, anti-aging, body sculpting, injectables, and, for my listeners, 25% off laser treatment. So if you have the gorilla back, if you don't want to take your shirt off at the pool come summertime because your wife's embarrassed, roll on up to Hadley Dermatology. Tell them you heard it on the show. They're going to give you 25% off any laser treatment, and that's big-time savings. So here's how you get the deal. You dial 801-657-5664. That's 801-657-5664. Or visit them online at hadleydermatology.com to schedule your appointment today. Early detection can save lives, and obviously a great deal with 25% off of laser treatments for my listeners. Time now for the PGA Tour leaderboard from our friends at Uinta Golf. They're doing a special on Callaway right now, which is the future of performance, featuring AI smart face irons. I don't know what that means, but check it out. When it comes to AI, I guess it's getting into golf now. So the third round of the Farmers Insurance Open is taking place at the Torrey Pines Golf Course. I believe they're on the South Course today. And, of course, most everybody's in the clubhouse. Andrew Novak finished on fire. He's 8 under par. Harris English is actually through 17. He's still on the course, and he's at 8 under par as well. Andrew was 6 under today. Harris 5 under today. Some names of note of Netflix fame. Joel Damon, who nearly lost his card last year, is in the top 5. He went 2 under today. He's 5 under for the tournament. Brant Snedeker is also at 4 under par. Sahith Tagala, 3 under par. Jason Day, also 3 under par. Hideki Matsuyama, 3 under par as well. A lot of the big dogs did not make the cut. Ludwig Aberg, who had the lead prior to the round today, had a rough go today. He's at 3 under par, which is good for 12th. And as we kind of scroll down, Keegan Bradley at 2 under par. Local boy Zach Blair finished really well today. He had a great first round, a horrible second round. I think he birdied 3 of his final 4 holes to go 2 under par for the tournament. That's tied for top 23. Be nice to see Zach at a top 20 finish. Zach Johnson is also at 2 under par. Tony Finau did not make the cut. Among other big names, Patrick Fishburne, local boy, did not make the cut. Peter Malnati, who won a PGA event last year, did not make the cut. And a lot of players ultimately failing to make the cut. Kurt Kitayama, Justin Rose. As we continue to scroll down, yeah, that's about it. So there you go. Round 4, the final round over the weekend, Farmers Insurance Open. All right, we will catch a quick break. We'll bring in Andy Larson coming up on the other side. We're going to say goodnight at 6 o'clock, make way for today's best on this Friday drive. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, wrapping it up. Friday edition of the show. Final segment of the day. Final segment of the week. Busy week, fun week. It's a fun time if you're a sports fan, as we are inching closer and closer to things like March Madness, the stretch run of the NBA. Obviously, we're about to say goodbye to football season. 3 more pro football games left, and then we are without football for a number of months. I know that makes a lot of you very, very sad. Have you dabbled with Blue Sky at all? Have you dabbled? I do not need more social media in my life. All I know is I cannot stay on Twitter. I just, like, there's nothing for me there anymore. I have muted and blocked most of the morons I don't want to hear from. But I swear, man, I don't know what it is about my feed. I don't know what it is about the algorithm. There's never anything of value. I don't tweet. I just send things out from the show. I don't know that I need more social media, but I do miss when Twitter was fun. Have you messed around with Blue Sky at all?
Not really. I have the account because of, similar reasons right there. And I still use Twitter and tweet, but like you, the app has become a lot less usable as far as like the search functions, the following stuff in real time, gathering news. You can still find stuff if you really look for it, but you're probably going to have to sift through like war videos from the Middle East, someone dying in a third world country, abuse videos, like
porn,
really, porn, a lot of that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to sift through a lot of it. And although you said you don't know why, we can go into that if you want. But I'm just, I guess, using it as a tool until I don't anymore. And I don't know, man. I'm at a point where we work in media, so I have to, we'll have to navigate it in some form or fashion. But I'm like, I don't want to download more social media. I don't want to do the next app for the business, for what we have to do to get our stuff out there. We'll adjust to it. But for me, for like my personal scrolling time outside of the stuff that we see, we get notified about the sports stuff. I've kind of checked out of a lot of it as well.
Now, before we bid you adieu for the weekend and say goodnight until Monday, we just need to, Porter, thoughts and prayers to the family of the Bull. We just have to, send some good vibes, thinking of the family of the Bull. And look, I am a person who has had public scrutiny as a result of some mistakes in the past, and it's not fun when you feel like everybody hates you because you made a mistake. Who's giving people like this money? Like the DOJ report, I clicked on it, and it said related stories, and there were like 11 Utah County entrepreneur arrested for defrauding. And like, what is going on? Who is giving these people money, and why are we surrounded by these absolute chodes that are morally bankrupt, that are fine stealing money from people in the name of some sort of like, this is how you become a man? It is so bothersome. We talked about it when the Alpha Chode Con was going on. It really bothered me because you could see what they were doing, are feasting on people that don't know any better. And this whole like manosphere movement where it's like, if you pay me $25,000, you can come to my ranch for the weekend and I'll yell at you while we hike. They're feasting on what I perceive to be a real issue in society, and that is lonely men that are trying to find their way through the world. So I don't know why people give them money, but I'm more upset that these people exist that seem to have no remorse or give a rip about the community, where they're destroying lives literally by stealing money from well-intentioned people that are trying to make their way through the world. It actually really pisses me off. I'm not going to lie.
Like you said, I've been the target of social media at some points before as well. It's not fun. What I haven't done, Spence, is scam 500 plus people, elderly people, my friends, people I went to school with, people I played football with, scam them out of their hard-earned money, lie to them about investments I'm making, and then just post about how cool I am on Instagram and how you should follow me and how you should learn from me and take my course. All of these dudes are snake oil salesmen. They don't have anything to offer you. So what are they selling you? Like literally, what are they selling you? The guy that we're talking about specifically, Jeremiah Evans, former BYU football player,
the Bull,
former BYU football member. He didn't play.
It's a stretch to call him a player.
His dad was a big donor. And he is the second former BYU football player to face federal fraud charges this summer or this year, right? it's an issue that, number one, fraud in Utah is a pretty common thing, pretty big thing, but it's infiltrating this, as you said, this like manosphere, this masculine man bro community. And here's the deal. Like you said, there are, and there is, I think, an epidemic of, guys that need a community, talk about things, talk about their emotions, talk about all this. But to do it in such an unhealthy way with a community of people who are just stealing your money, I'm telling you, is going to put you in the wrong direction, not the right one. So, yeah, if that can be our PSA for today, we know we're, in the sports world. And since this is very much overlapping with the sports world in a lot of ways, don't give your money to people that don't offer anything to you.
Yes.
It's pretty simple.
No, well said. I mean, like over 20 mil, man. And like, I hope they throw the book at this dude. But anyway, no winners. He has a family. Was he the dude that was wearing boots so he could look taller than his wife in a social? Yeah.
And he's the one who, and he did the AlphaCon thing. He organized it.
Boots with heels on it, right?
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, he didn't tell all the people who were speaking at that event that he was calling it AlphaCon.
Oh.
That was another con of his, that he was like conning those guys into using his event to like build his Instagram page. Again,
what
it's a complete con, and it's a complete fraud. And sometimes when you do fraud, you face the music.
Yeah, I just feel bad for these people that thought they were getting some money and probably sent them all their savings. Apparently, there are stories of people that have nothing left. It just sucks. But anyway, I digress. Fun weekend ahead. Enjoy the football. Enjoy the college basketball and the hockey, too. It's a good, fun time of year if you're a sports fan. All right, Porter, what comes our way on a Monday edition of the show?
You mentioned it. Hockey, football, basketball. We got it all over the weekend and on the station, too. So tune in for all of that. We will recap the hockey from the weekend. Bill Frazier of the Salt Lake Tribune will recap the football of the weekend with Stevenson Sylvester talking some NFL. Tom Haberstroh for our NBA Daily Assist. And then we'll go from there, a few feelers out, probably another football guest with the games over the weekend. That's likely to be top of mind on a Monday.
All right, there you go. So enjoy that weekend. Cannot wait for Sunday. I think both these games are going to be awesome. You can hear both of them on our radio station, Utah Men, Utah Women tomorrow, college basketball as well. Special thank you today to Andy Larson, to Howard Beck, to Trey Fitzgerald, to Lindsey Rhodes, and to Chris Camerati for any of the sound you may miss from the show. Website, ESPN700sports.com. Our mobile app is free, and you can take us on the go. It's the ESPN 700 app in the App Store and the Google Play Store, our podcast page. If you are looking for what we do either today or anytime, there's like 30,000 episodes up there. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. If you have some time this weekend, subscribe, rate, review on your preferred podcast catcher. If you say nice things, give us all the stars. You will be eternally blessed. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. We'll talk to you on a Monday drive. Have a great weekend. Talk to you Monday right here on ESPN 700.